Okay.
And it's not open book.
You didn't? No.
I'm up on
But it's
secret.
open,
You're
you
on?
say open book or open bar?
It's all, it's
Open bar.
a mic grab.
All right, we're live here.
There's one more hoop you gotta jump through, that's
Um,
all.
Those days.
All right, so we're at the work session for February twenty-second,
Government at its
2018. We have Jeff Seaman here, Jeffrey Murphy, and Bob Kozakevich, and we're going to discuss a debriefing for the tri-board meeting. So doing that, I will turn it over to Jeff Murphy.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Seems like we were just here last night.
Yeah. Deja vu.
Sleep here.
Yeah, and at least it's not as warm in here as it was last night.
Oh my, yeah.
Not far from it though.
Yeah, I know.
It's getting warmer.
Oh, yep, let's just start with the, put that on the work session. Jim, go ahead.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes. Even that was speedy.
Okay.
All right.
When we left the tri-board meeting, I left with two really good points that we need to focus on in terms of where we've been, where we are today, and where are we gonna go forward with to make things better. The first one is the coordination between boards, namely the town board, the planning board, and the zoning board. More and more, we're starting to see applications that require a special permit from the town board, site plan from the planning board, and then a variance from the zoning board of appeals. And in the past is which comes first. And the old school way of doing it was you go to the zoning board, get your approval, get a variance, a secret determination. Go to another board, get an action, a decision, and secret determination. And you go to the third board and you get an action and a secret determination. That's not the most efficient or best way of doing secret. In fact, secret discourages that segmentation of an environmental review. It should be coordinated, and that's where, if you get, I'm not gonna get into nuts and bolts of, type 1 and type 2 and unlisted action, I'm gonna leave that to Jeff Seaman. But when you have coordinated review like that, you're supposed to be working together and how best to do that. And I think in the best case that we're doing now is that you are the umbrella agency of the board. Special permit comes to you first. You initiate secret as soon as you can. As part of that process, you immediately coordinate to the planning board and the zoning board and any other involved agencies that have a stake or a permit in that application. The question then is how does that board react to that referral? And I've spoken with Bob about it, and I've spoken to Dick Ehlers about it. And when they get a referral from you is, okay, board, planning board, or zoning board, what saith you in terms of the secret review of this application? What are the key things that jump out with you that are good about the application and where things that cause you some concern? And it gets placed on the agenda as a discussion item. It's not a hearing item. It cannot be open to the public because the application is not complete. At that meeting, the planning board can deliberate amongst themselves, gets a report from the planning staff as to what we think the issues are, our initial recommendations. The board can ask the applicant to come up and give a presentation or answer any questions it may have about their project. But again, it's not a public discussion at that time because the application is not deemed complete. You can't deem an application complete until secret decision has been acted on by the lead agency. So
Let me just, so if say we have a special permit, the planning board can request the applicant to come in and ask questions of them. Okay, so it's an
Yeah.
they would invite them to come, and that they'll be reviewing it.
I think just out of professional courtesy, you tell the applicant it's gonna be on for a certain meeting date, that we're gonna be discussing your application, be prepared in case the board wants you to come up to present it or has any questions about it. So really the board's decision whether how they want to invite the applicant into that,
Okay.
into their deliberations. So once they've had that discussion, we prepare a report on their behalf, get them to review and adopt it, and then they'll forward their written comments back to you as the board, and then you as the board make a decision on how you want secret to proceed. And that's where I'm gonna turn the secret process back over to Jeffrey to get more into the nuts and bolts of the secret process itself.
So can I just clarify something
Sure.
based on your section? So the special permit, okay? So they come in, they say, I wanna build a bistro on the corner of Manor Road and 25, Main Road in Jamesport.
Yep.
And so they go, we want a special permit from the town board. So they would first fill out a special permit application with the town clerk and the secret form, so that secret can get started.
Okay.
Then it would come to the town board for a public hearing for the special permit.
No.
No?
No
No,
public hearing.
we decide, yeah, go ahead.
Secret comes first, and as part of that, they have to have a conceptual site plan so that you know what you see what they're proposing. At that point, we identify if it's a type 1, type 2, or an unlisted action. Most of the time, and with a special permit and a site plan, it's always gonna be either type 1 or unlisted, one or the other. And unlisted is, coordination is optional, but strongly recommended, or as a type 1, your referrals is mandatory.
Okay, so it would be the special permit with the town clerk and a secret.
Right.
And then it would be
Well,
reviewed by planning staff and as conceptual site plan, and planning would prepare a staff report, and then it would undergo secret review.
the secret, they'd have to come before the town board before secret review starts, because we're involved in determining the secret, and then when they would go to the other boards.
Okay, but
So it
that's
would come
once,
here.
once it's been reviewed by Jeff to determine whether it's a type 1, type 2, or unlisted. And then it would come to the town board for a special permit.
You would get a copy of my analysis together with any of the site plan comments that would be dovetailed with it, for, just the normal course of distribution of that information.
But then
So-
we would determine what the secret was. It's
No, I will,
make a recommendation.
well, the state, if you could move to the next,
We would determine who lead agency is, whether it's
So-
the town board, the planning board, or or the various boards,
Well, you-
or New York State
When you
DEC.
do
Well,
secret,
I can
let Jeff
Yeah,
explain
go.
the secret process.
Okay,
um,
I just am trying to understand what the process
right,
will
the
be,
steps that are involved,
Right,
have one follows
because-
the other,
because this is helpful.
correct.
And since Jeff has been here on a part-time basis for the past few years, and since Dawn has been the attorney for the zoning board, no decisions have been made until secret is done. That's not the way that it was done in the past, so I thank you both for that.
But that's what we're trying to clarify here, so
Yeah.
that everybody's on the same page,
Right.
and that's the point of this.
Yeah,
But it has to
On the
have,
zoning board though, when we have like a simple setback variance, that's a type 2.
Correct.
That's a nothing, that's a nothing burger.
Correct.
Those are the only instances where we would be doing something with action.
can you,
Right.
Let's let Jeff, let Jeff do this, and then we can,
Yeah, really.
ask all the other questions
It was,
after.
I was following pretty good, and then I got confused, so.
So, I don't wanna revamp everything that went on the other night, but of course, these are all the actions that are subject to secret review. The next slide, please. And this is administered through really through the planning department, and then each of the attorneys that represent any and all of these boards from the internal distribution and coordination. These, of course, don't include those that go beyond the town that would also get involved. It could be Suffolk County Planning, Suffolk County Health Department, Suffolk County DPW, State DOT, et cetera. But this is our general list of distribution. The next slide, please. So, after an application is received and we distribute it, the applicant completes the short environmental assessment form, part 1, or the full environmental assessment form, part 1, and then I and the department review parts 2, and then we establish who will be the lead agency under SECRA. And the lead agency established under a type 1 requires coordination, and usually we write up a resolution with a recommendation as to which board will be the lead agency for all of the SECRA review. We send out a letter together with the part 1 of that application, because the type 1 action mandates that coordinated review. And we wait 30 days to see if any other agencies involved in the approval process wish to challenge internally or locally, whether it's planning board, zoning board, or town board, or CDA, who would coordinate review under SECRA as the lead agency.
so, under a type 1, does that automatically trigger an environmental impact statement?
No, That's a good question, though. Most people think it does. It does not. It only requires that a type 1 action, which are classified by New York State DEC as type 1s, there's a list. And if you fall into that category, you must complete the full environmental assessment form, and it's mandated that you coordinate review as the lead agency. There's no automatic requirement as a type 1. However, and I've included the full environmental assessment form in the packet. During my review, if any one of the items trigger a certain order of magnitude of impact, moderate or significant, it's an automatic environmental impact statement. Now, it can be streamlined to address simply those few items that are highlighted. It might be traffic, might be water resources, might be community character, whatever it is. But once it crosses over that borderline, then you initiate an EIS. That's mandatory on a type 1.
And moderate and significant, is there a point system or that's a judgment call?
It's a judgment call. It might be, for example, one of the questions includes, is the project compatible with an existing comprehensive plan? And if it was in conflict with that particular land use under a comp plan, it could be an automatic type 1. A type 1 action includes projects that include disturbance greater than 10 acres. So if it were to be 10 acres, well, that's automatic type 1. But if those 10 acres might be adjacent to a sensitive environmental area where wetlands or tiger salamanders are likely to be disturbed, now you're gonna go over the threshold for the potential impact.
So
Because
you
you're
end
in
up
a type 1, you're in a sensitive area, there are known habitats of threatened species, you're gonna be type 1 and you'll do an EIS. Once that EIS is scoped, you might narrow it down to natural resources. Maybe there's sewers in the area, water supply, et cetera, so you're not going to study those to death, but the inventories and the protection and mitigation would really surround your natural resources. So that's actually, there have been some improvements in SEQRA to really try and narrow down the scoping, so
So
it
you're not just
doesn't
doing
get
a
out
broad-
of.
That's the issues that need to be addressed. Okay.
Which is why Peconic Carrot did the EIS, because there was the water issue, right?
Well,
They didn't.
they didn't
Did
do
not do
any
any
EIS. So,
Original neg deck.
but
But they were type 1.
you can go type 1, but you can expand the responses to a type 1 in order to explain in greater detail
Without a full EIS.
without a full EIS.
Okay,
However, that does not exempt the applicant from still being type 1 and moving into the category of, if it's the lead agency's decision that they still want this studied further, they can be told to do the EIS. The one discussion, that we had with,
traffic study.
right,
if there's several factors
Right.
in the
Yes.
secret review, then an
Right.
EIS would be requested. But I think that's a good question that Laura asked, is what actually triggers that? You know, like, do you have a list of questions, like, okay, natural resources,
Yeah.
environmental,
on a type 1 form, the part 2 addresses all those questions about impact and impact threshold. And then the part 3 of that is, that's where you fill in the real blanks as to where you think as an analyst, it just has a reasonable potential to trigger an impact of that magnitude. So no one really knows if it will or it will not, which is why you want to do the EIS
Yeah, right.
to determine if it will.
okay,
The other,
sorry. just
well,
wanted
no, the
clarification on
other
this.
things are, that in an EIS, if you do an EIS, the town, under the law, is allowed to either prepare that EIS itself or have the sponsor prepare the EIS. But in either case, if the town prepares it, they can charge the sponsor back for the fee. And if the town reviews a sponsor-provided draft environmental impact and final environmental impact statement, they can charge back for that review.
Can I just ask why the town would not be the one doing the EIS? I mean, if it's the town that is asking for certain things to be studied, why wouldn't it be the town, choosing who they want to do the EIS?
Well, that's a good question, but it can sometimes be staffing, issues. It can be, just putting the burden back on the town. Sometimes the applicant is going to be required to come up with, different alternative designs as part of the alternative selection process in scoping the EIS. Is probably more effective and efficient, since they have all the survey data on their own site and all the grading and engineering information. They can reposition that themselves.
Typically, the firms that prepare those documents have their own traffic engineer, their own environmentalist.
So they have the resources?
They have the resources.
Okay.
We would have to outsource and, cherry pick as, okay, who do you want for the traffic engineer, who do you want for do the environmental, who's an expert in bat habitat, who's a hydrologist, who, the list goes on and on. Whereas we're the one-stop shop, we can tell the applicant, these are things we want you to analyze, you go figure it out. If we don't like what you're saying, we can hire somebody to review it.
Okay, so you could do on the back end,
Right.
if you're not happy with, or things are too vague or whatever, you can say that we're not satisfied with what you've produced for us.
Right.
We'd like to
Hire our own traffic
hire our own
engineer.
track to go to
Right.
review, okay.
And then charge the applicant for that cost.
Yeah,
Okay.
but Jeff, have we been charging? When we review, have we been charging?
No.
Because we can, right?
We would have to
Okay.
hire somebody, not for staff time, but for an outside consultant like a traffic engineer.
It's part of the site plan application that they pay for these reviews that they're doing.
For the initial reviews,
Yes.
that's correct.
This-
But we have not had, we did a draft environmental impact statement where planning board was lead agency. And were there any others? I think the rest were, it was a voluntary draft environmental impact statement, which applicants, if they feel that they're going to be required to do an impact statement, they can submit a voluntary draft. But the voluntary draft is just that, it's just a draft. The lead agencies have to review that, they have to determine whether or not it's adequate, if it's fulfilled what the lead agency sincerely believes should be studied. If it isn't, it's rejected, they have to rewrite it, but the lead agency has to provide adequate comments and substantive reasons for its rejection so that they can respond to it intelligently, and then it gets resubmitted. And that's true whether it's a draft EIS or a voluntary EIS.
So that's basically, they've scoped it themselves with the voluntary.
Correct. And it's, I think, far more prudent to have a public scoping session, or at least a formal scoping session, which is optional under SECRE. It's not mandated, but having been involved in EISs that have been formally scoped and not formally scoped, it's much better to scope them. Everybody is clear as to the level of detail, the types of methodologies that are acceptable to the lead agency for the analyses that are going to be conducted. Are you going to do, for example, on-site noise studies, or are literature searches sufficient? And depending upon what you're looking to study, that will determine what method and acceptability to the lead agency the applicant is going to have to prepare. It also makes the review for adequacy easier for the analyst, because now I would have a comparative list to say they met the thresholds, or hey, we instructed you to go out and do physical traffic counts at Christmas at the shopping mall and you didn't do it, so I can't accept the traffic section of your impact statement.
So let me ask you a question. With the project downtown, the 5-story building that's underway and being constructed, was there a public scoping session before the voluntary EIS?
Not for Gallo.
No.
You
No.
guys didn't hold one.
Well, because
We asked.
we didn't even get the report until after it was already on the table, and I abstained from the vote because I do own a building in downtown Riverhead, but now that it's been approved and it's underway, I can speak freely about it. But, there were some things in that voluntary report that I read that really bothered me, and, I think that if there was a public scoping session with Landmarks, ARB, and, you know, the water department and the fire department and everybody, all their concerns were all discussed, and those were the objects or the things to be studied, then it would have been a more
Open-ended,
sophisticated,
Right, we run very
Yeah,
tight
yeah,
time constraints.
comprehensive,
But I think that is the point of all of this,
Yes.
so that
I
we know, you know, we have a better understanding of what we're doing, a better understanding of what needs to be addressed, so, yeah.
Well, and so that moving forward,
right,
it doesn't occur again.
right, so that's what I'm asking. So from now on, when an application comes in and there's a, you know, one-page EAF that's filled out, and then you decide that that's not enough, that it's type 1, they have to go further and do the full EAF. At that time, would you say, let's have a, meeting with the fire department, the water district, the ARB, the landmarks commission, and the town board, or member of the town board, member of the zoning board, member
Well,
of the...
that's, I'll let you answer, but that's part of the secret process when you distribute everything to all of the agencies and you're looking for their comments, so if we review it and we see something that we didn't see, that's when you give the other agency, hey, listen, this project's coming through, we know that it's been presented to you, we're doing our secret our scoping for it, and we'd like to have your comment back on it before we do the scope for the,
Yeah. Well, we do that now.
But perhaps, and I'm not certain that all of the department heads in those other municipal components, they might look at it and say, oh, sure, we have sewers in the area, that's, hookup shouldn't be a problem, or we have an adequate water main that, and they may be looking at it in a very narrow scope as to their participation and realize they don't really have anything to say. But that's why if, for example, if town board is lead agency and I make a recommendation, this be positive declaration, which I'll explain in a moment, and that an EIS should, you know, is recommended that the applicant prepare, we should go with that, and then we can seek out the real input from all the other departments as to how it should all play out during the study. To do that prior to the preparation of the EIS, they're involved in maybe building a water main or adding a water main someplace else, so they might get my memo and say, oh yeah, I don't wanna be lead agency, whatever they're doing over there is fine. But you're right, you have to look at it.
Yeah, because if the fire
Comprehensively.
department is saying until after the project's approved, hey, there's a problem with the water pressure and getting the water up to the 5th floor of the building in order to put out a fire, and then the water district's saying we don't have enough pressure, because they're not, the fire district and the water department are not vandalizing
But
it.
that's exactly what
That's
this is
what
all
the
about.
lead agency
That's why,
has to do.
Right.
And that's why trying to prepare these things internally could be very difficult, because we have enough to coordinate with all
Without
the other
them.
departments to make sure that the applicant's engineers haven't missed something.
okay, yep,
And
no,
they all-
that's,
Okay.
we'll take it.
Let's keep
So,
Jeff going here.
so those are the type 1, the EISs. The type 2s I discussed the other night, they're the straightforward ones. As Dawn said, there's a New York State DEC list of type 2 actions. And once a type 2 has been classified as a type 2, there is no further secret action that takes place. The project can just simply move forward through the decision-making process. So I review all the ZBA applications that come in. I type 2 those that are appropriately set. I send a memo into the ZBA, and they can go ahead and make their decisions. Now, all those that don't fall into type 1 and type 2 categorically on the list become an unlisted action. As Jefferson said, coordinated review is optional, but it's usually recommended. They do not need to complete the full environmental assessment form. Sometimes I will ask that be done if I think the short form doesn't give us enough information. And perhaps the expanded version of the environmental assessment form, the thicker documents, can answer traffic studies, water demands, community characteristics in the unlisted actions. I have the next slide. So how do we reach this point of a decision where the process can continue through the review on behalf of the applicant and the board that is reviewing this, which is usually the lead agency? So, when we hear these terms, neg deck and pos deck, what they mean is that this is a determination of the significance of the impacts reasonably expected by the project. A negative declaration means that we don't anticipate any adverse impacts will occur. You can issue a negative declaration if you've done enough of a hard look, and the project can move forward through the review process. It doesn't mean site plan is finished, that doesn't mean special conditions have been eliminated, it just simply means you can continue your review, and you don't need to do any more coordination with other agencies. But on the POS deck, and this is what leads to an EIS, if just one potential adverse impact is identified, then they're moving into the DEIS, usually with a scoping session. The EIS carries with it a minimum 30-day public comment period once the lead agency accepts it as adequate. The comments have to be responded to by the applicants or whoever prepares it with a final environmental impact statement. And
So
then
when does the 30-day trigger, when does that start, the 30-day trigger, after you?
well, there are a number of specific deadlines, and I'm kind of jumping
Okay, so.
to the primary ones. The first is a 30-day time frame to establish lead agency,
Okay,
to hear back, and once you're cleared, then you can go ahead with your continued secret review. And the other is that if there is an EIS prepared, once it's accepted and it gets distributed, it's on the website, it's in the public library, planning department, town hall. The public is allowed to comment on it for a minimum of 30 days.
so if you were to hold, okay.
So if you want to hold an
this
EIS hearing, you have it within that
A 30-day period, not at the end,
Yes.
okay.
And those can be extended with cooperation of the applicant, because sometimes, even under SECR, a particularly controversial project itself could trigger an EIS. So what you want to do is to make sure that you have had adequate time for feedback, not only from the public, but all of the other agencies involved. And sometimes that comes in very, very late, even after we close SECR and we're finished and we've issued a finding statement. 2 months later, we get a letter from some agency about a comment, which is somewhat their fault for not having responded within the time that they should have. But each agency is to prepare a finding statement. So while the lead agency prepares its own findings, it may actually conflict with another agency's finding, but that just simply means that those are
Another thing for
considerations that
consideration.
the applicant will have to resolve with that other involved agency.
So what happens in the case where Island Water Park was subdividing out of the EPCAL property and they were taking 50 acres off the EPCAL property, and the environmental assessment form was filled out and the DEC came back and said, we want lead agency, and Phil Cardinelli was supervisor at the time and said, no, the town wants lead agency, and, you know, there was a big battle and it was tied up in litigation for what, 5 years, 6 years?
When there is a conflict,
7 years?
when there is a conflict between two requesting agencies for lead agency and it can't be resolved, it's left up to the commissioner of New York State DEC in Albany. He makes the final decision.
Okay,
So
because,
that's,
Don't fight the DEC then.
so,
Well,
yeah,
just,
And if the DEC
Case
wants to
in
be
point,
lead agency, that's.
they're getting
Yeah.
it.
we had that happen in Southampton, and we're still waiting for the
A
decision
commissioner from the decision from the commissioner.
There we go.
Well, that's why I told Phil, I said, just, who cares? Let the DEC be lead agency.
or you can
know?
share, if you can reach
That was 10
a
years ago.
compromise, you can each share lead agency status. So in some cases, major projects might have US EPA and US Coast Guard as a lead agency jointly combined. That can happen if you can't reach a decision as to who should be a lead agency. But really, lead agency just simply means you're going to take the responsibility to coordinate all of
Coordinate
this.
everything, right, it doesn't mean that you have any more power.
Correct.
So once a finding statement is issued or a negative declaration is issued, secret is completed, then you can move on with the rest of the review process.
I just want to touch one base about the unlisted actions. Lead agency coordination with other agencies is optional, as Jeffrey pointed out. If you choose not to coordinate with any other agency, the other agencies that could be involved, such as the planning board, can render their own secret determination. So if you issue a neg deck and did not coordinate, the planning board could issue its own findings and issue a positive declaration and require EIS. So there's a risk to the applicant. There may be some efficiency in terms of that, but it may bite them in a subsequent by another agency. And we saw that happen with Peconic Crossing, where we issued our own secret coordination, and then the state came back and said, no, it's going to do secret on its own. They didn't pause deck it, but they wouldn't not accept our secret determination. They had to make their own, and that cost the applicant approximately 3 months.
And we've sometimes had agencies issue a decision, prior to our completion of secret.
That's an ongoing issue with DEC and the town on coastal applications. Is who comes first,
That's it.
the DEC permit or our approval?
That's a different problem.
So, if an environmental assessment form was completed, because, bistros are allowed in certain zoning districts and on Main Road in Jamesport, I know that we're gonna be getting applications in. So if it comes to the town board for special permit after you've done your secret review, we determine that, there is no serious or significant impact that would deem a DEIS or an FEIS, then it could go to the planning board. Then the planning board might make a recommendation that they have to go to the zoning board, because at the time it comes to the town board, we don't know that they're gonna be going for variances for
Well,
lot
if we're-
coverage and
that's-
for lot area, and so at that time, then, once they start applying for all those variances,
Well,
That's the that's what we're trying to eliminate.
That's what we wanna see
So-
from the applicant.
So if somebody were coming here for a special permit, they would come here, and then we would establish ourselves as lead agency, ourselves as lead agency, and when you have the secret process, we would then communicate with the other boards and saying that we're lead agency on this, we're doing secret, we'd like your advice or your comment to look at the project that's out, give us back your input, then we would do the scoping for that. And hopefully, all of those issues would be addressed, so that when they do go to the other boards, we've all addressed the same issues
And it's in a
prior to them
report.
coming to that.
Right.
The planning board could say to them, okay, we're going to give our comments back to the town board as lead agency. We ask the applicant to come in and please talk to us first, because we know what you're showing us, and we have questions about that, so that needs to be included within your scoping and for your environmental impact statement, so that somebody isn't doing exactly what you said, where they come here and then go to the planning board and start a different conversation with them. It's all
Which is
supposed to fall under
what's been happening.
one umbrella, and that's the point of our coordination for this.
We had a really recent application, I'm not gonna name any names, it was for medical offices on the first floor in a residential zone for a special permit with residential upstairs. And they came to you first as, as the special permit and lead agency, and the board immediately had a number of concerns with buffering, setback being in a residential area, being buffering next to the residential. You gave an indication that you are not in favor of reduced setbacks, which would necessitate a variance, so that's sending a clear message to try to design this product so it doesn't need variances, that complies with the code. That's absolutely the perfect way of the process, that comes to you first as the umbrella agency to give to our guys, the applicant, that you do not want any relief given the fact, buffering.
Right, but in that particular application, because I did watch the planning board meeting when staff actually appeared before the planning board, and there was no physical report, it was basically an interpretation by the staff person as to what was discussed
Well,
by the town board.
that's part of the issue that we'll be
Yes.
discussing a little
Okay.
bit.
But in that case, the planning board agreed with the board on the issue of the buffer, and the applicant was there and heard loud and clear that there was, the town board and the planning board neither wanted to see a relief of that buffer.
I guess the part of the discussion of this is what is the mechanism of communication? I think what we need to determine if it's through the planning department, and if it's through the planning department, what kind of written report we then attach to that project for the other boards to have available to them. So that's part of what this is about.
Yeah, it's an evolving process, and it's getting better. we just have to fine tune it.
Yeah, some kind of.
My only comment with respect to that, because as you know, the other boards, planning board and zoning board, they're independent bodies, they're appointed, and you always have to be careful when the town board is looking to tread into the other board's provinces. So if it's a report,
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. Once it starts suggesting what they should do, I think you have to be very, 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 very careful.
No, it's our comment as lead agency,
Okay.
having reviewed that, and then share, I mean, we discussed it in an open session. It's done at a
I
work session.
understand that.
So we report off what our comments was. I mean, it could be, you know, it can be verbally what we said. It could be the minutes from the meeting, so it's not a,
All right, it's just a report.
Right, a
Yeah,
report,
it's a
our opinions, our
transcript.
concerns,
Okay.
not necessarily steering, trying to
Okay.
steer the planning board or the zoning board in any
Okay.
particular direction. You know we can't do that.
Identify the issue and then specify why. For instance, it could be a traffic issue or whatever the concern is, as to why, not just, well, we don't want this or like this. Then the board has a better opportunity to consider, not to, and to receive, because your traffic studies and all that stuff will say, you know, there's an issue with cars turning radiuses or whatever it is, so that we understand when we see what comes, why you are concerned about that particular issue. And then
Well, that's
they
what I'm saying, like, almost a report after it comes to the, rather than the minutes, because the minutes could be a 20-page document, and, you know, we don't have our work session minutes typed by the court stenographer. We, only if somebody questions what was said at a work session, do we request that the court stenographer type the minutes from the meeting. And so, I agree with you. I think that it needs to be in some written form, that these are the concerns that the town board had, you know, it's budding residential property, it's going to be a commercial use, we don't want the buffer reduced. Well, you know, we don't want any setback variances, because.
whatever the conditions are
Right.
on the application.
Well,
Yeah,
I always think of it as, what's called a memorandum of understanding, so it's somewhat, it's non-binding to some degree, but also the applicant has to be aware of these concerns, and there's no way, there's no restriction that you can't communicate with the applicant, since they're seeking a special permit from you, that you say, gee, this all sounds great, however, we have some concerns, and they're outlined this way, and then it's in the public record that is accessible to all boards to
And at the end
at
of that,
least consider.
at the end of that day, after hearing the town board and the planning board, they had clear direction going back to the client, was the architect.
I mean, I think that's the ultimate goal, so that there's not confusion.
Now,
Right.
when they come to the zoning board can ask questions relating to or concerns and, you know, observations of the application. And then they can flush out their record, so their record is solid.
but I think that it's
And they
important to
go
have a
over all this.
memorandum of
But
understanding.
it has to be in writing,
Got the
so
power to do it.
the applicant is,
Which they can.
telling the different boards what they think they heard at the meeting.
But I
which-
think the memorandum of understanding
You need something in writing.
from the town board and from the planning board before an applicant goes to the zoning board, so that the zoning board can be, you know, understand what the basis was for our decision. So that, you know, okay, we gave you a special permit for a bistro, but that doesn't mean that you can build another 10,000 square feet in the shopping center, because,
And have it encroach on the neighbors. And
right,
Yeah, I think we're all saying the same
Yeah.
thing here, so.
I think the best design is to give guidance to an applicant that they should design a product to avoid the need for a variance. That saves everybody a lot of.
You would hope.
Well, I think it helps avoid having to go to the ZBA. I mean, if the guy just says, all right, you look at that, but, you know, why don't I just amend my site plan to accommodate all these concerns, that's all.
Right.
But you
Exactly.
see, the whole purpose of SECR is also to act as sort of a stopgap measure, because if you're the lead agency, until you've completed SECR, no decisions are going to be made, so it does give you an opportunity to oversee the control of the project decision-making process, so it isn't premature, and they don't run out with an approval from here,
And go
and
there.
then go to the ZBA and
Right.
say, oh, I want a variance.
Yeah, right. I get it.
I wanna say one further thing. Before being here, I was on the other side of the aisle, private practitioner, and some of the things I'm hearing today have been things that the town's been doing from 2004, 2005. When an applicant came in, planning staff would say, can you design this so that you reduce or eliminate your variance needs. So this is not new. We're not recreating the wheel, and we're not doing things that are, you know, haven't been being done by planning. I think I just wanna point that out. The second thing, we touched on it very, very early, is, you know, should the applicant be given some kind of a notice when their project's gonna be discussed? That was a problem. I don't think it is anymore, but there were many instances, and I'm not gonna name any particular project, where unbeknownst to the applicant, unbeknownst to applicant's counsel, project would end up on the agenda, be discussed, and things would be done, or directions would happen with that. I think that's wrong. Again, I don't represent their side, but I think for the sake of full transparency, the public being able to be heard, applicants being able to be heard, applicants' attorneys being able to be heard, that's the way it should work.
And just, you know, on that point, I don't think we're, this is not a finger pointing thing by
I'm not looking
any
at
means.
fingers.
This really is to review the way that we're doing things.
Right.
And maybe make some changes where there can be some, there's ability for some improvement. So that's all this is, and I think everybody's
Yeah,
in agreement
I just
with
wanna
that.
point out that that was being done, and then you guys instituted, or the town instituted, the two Tuesday meetings, which, again, is pre-submission type of conference, which is designed to do the same thing. Bring out a lot of the issues, the coordination, you know, can you redesign this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think a lot of that was in place, and again, I think the tri-board meeting brought out a lot of good things, and this is a good discussion.
Yep, at least we're talking about it. We
Okay,
gotta talk to
so
each other, that's the problem.
these are just some of the recommendations that we discussed the other night, just in conceptual terms. There's the memorandum of understanding of whatever mechanism you want to come up with. And then you still have the option to, at some point, implement your own chapter on secret. Next.
Do most other towns actually have a chapter? Or do they do it as a policy, or just as a procedure, or procedural you know?
Southampton has it.
Zone chapter.
Southold has it. We do not have it. So I don't know, it might give a little bit more attention or guidance. Again,
Clarity.
yeah, they all follow New York State DEC general guidelines. I'm trying to determine, maybe Bob can answer this, if the town can determine other thresholds for type 1 actions.
In Southampton, in that chapter, they have added uses and thresholds to the type 1 list. They also designate the planning board as the secret clearinghouse, because there is no coordination between, they don't have a special permit that goes to their town board, so everything is either planning board or town board, they're independent. So when there's a zoning board application, it's unless they're type 1, the planning board by code is the secret court. According to Bob's question about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the state enabling legislation allowed towns to do that. Once they set up their own separate chapter and develop that criteria, they can spell out additional things under type 1 that they would consider to be type 1 actions. So
if you
my
had-
understanding is yes.
Yes, so if that's indeed, and I agree with Bob, but I defer to the attorneys for that question. You could set a threshold lower than that of the state for the type 1. And again, all that means is that the full environmental assessment form and coordinated review is mandatory. It does not mean EIS de facto.
But it just takes a closer look as the project's come
Correct. It
through
just means
and
the project
obligated,
is-
and there's less variance about who
scrutinized.
gets one and who doesn't.
Right, and the key really being in the coordinated review, so decisions don't get made
Segmented.
prematurely.
Yeah, for instance, in the Southampton code, they have a chapter 157, which is entitled Environmental Quality Review. And they have subsection B, which is in addition to other defined type 1 actions, they delineate 7 other types of things that would trigger a type 1 determination or classification.
They
I
have,
should say.
for the certain tribal areas that they feel that needs a further review of archaeological analysis above and beyond that what's in the secret regulations. And so in those areas, they want the applicant to be aware when they submit the application, you're gonna be required to do an archaeological dig, you're gonna require a report, and that sort of thing.
If you wanted to protect historic or cultural resources, et cetera, you can set that threshold. Those will be type ones.
Those
or
are two of them that,
certain
those are two of them that are
areas.
talked about in their code.
We do that in Lubec.
Critical environmental areas designated as, protecting cultural, historic, archaeological areas, so.
So you obviously have read that. A few times, I'm sure.
I think I've seen a few codes, yes, thank you.
Jeff, as we move to revitalize our downtown, it seems as though any project on the south side of Main would require DEIS. So if like with the Gallo project, when they did a voluntary DEIS, did that limit the input that we were able, or did that limit us in any way as to questions or concerns that we had?
As Jeffrey pointed out earlier, if you did not think that what they submitted was adequate, that you felt that additional review was required, you could still go and prospect the application and require, them to go back and submit the information, get the information that you're seeking.
But there was no public scoping. There was no public hearing for scoping for that
That was
project.
an unusual application, we're under really tight time.
So for the process downtown, that would be something that we would want to make sure that we have moving forward, because I would think, I don't know, I would want to fine tune that process,
So is this
since
something
it's
that,
on the river.
is this something that the board may wanna consider, a chapter for the environmental review process? Do you think this is something that we
I
should
think it's a great idea.
consider?
Yeah, I thought that was a good idea, I heard the other night.
All right, so,
I just, back to the memorandum of understanding.
Yeah.
So, when you come to us at a work session and we say, these are our concerns, and then who prepares the memorandum of understanding for the town board when you come to us at a work session? And then, is that memorandum of understanding reviewed by all the members of the town board, and then a resolution adopted, moving the memorandum of understanding forward to the planning board and the zoning board and any other agencies that may, and the same with the planning board and the zoning board is?
it would be prepared by us, because it would be, we would be the lead agency.
So
we're-
Bob,
so
the
we-
town attorney, would do that?
I would,
It
in most
doesn't have-
cases, I would prepare, or Jeffrey would prepare a bullet list of, these are things that you felt were important with the application.
It would be reviewed
I
by
would,
us.
it'd be reviewed by you before it was distributed, because we would just like the secretary, authoring the paper for you, but it would be under your guidance, and if we got something wrong, if we didn't say it correctly, you would give us guidance on correcting that, before we distribute it publicly.
I don't think we need to go to do a resolution at
We,
town
no,
meeting.
we are the lead agency. Being the lead agency, we are leading the secret process. So if we decided that we needed, what we'd be doing is sending that to the other boards, asking for their input. So this is prior to them going before any one of these boards to do anything. No action is being taken while we are doing this process. That's the point of this, because, so that it doesn't, they can't go to the planning board and to the zoning board to discuss anything until we decide, that we have our secret and our scoping done. That needs to be completed first. We're asking them for their input on the project, but nothing is happening within those boards until we receive their input and secret is completed.
I don't think that that's the way it works in every town, though, where the town board is the lead agency, because if there's no action by the town board,
What was it?
That would be my question. If it's a
why
planning
don't you
board
come up,
subdivision
Dawn?
or.
Yeah.
No,
If
it's
a
fine.
site plan, planning board subdivision.
Right.
Then the town board has no action that
Right.
it would be taking.
Right.
And it wouldn't be included in the secret.
That's right.
Right, but for those, I'm talking about if we're lead agency on something. If we're not lead
Renewal areas.
agency and it's be something before the planning board, then the planning board would,
their own
communicate with us that they're the lead agency, do we have any input on something if something were to come before us? But it wouldn't really, the only thing they would say to us maybe is, I would expect not necessarily from the secret files, but if they have something coming before them, just as a communication, something continuously like the small lot ordinance. If something that was before zoning all the time, you'd
That's
expect,
legislation.
but we'd expect that communication back from zoning if it becomes an issue all the time. So, which is a different kind of
That's a different kind of
communication.
referral, but I'm just thinking if the town board didn't have any
Action.
authority,
Right.
then the town board really wouldn't
Correct,
We wouldn't,
want to
yeah.
get involved.
Correct.
in that.
correct. It's only when it's either in an urban renewal zone or it's a special permit, then it comes
That's
through here. But otherwise, if the planning board was lead agency, then, they would be doing their secret process then.
Right, and coordinating with zoning board.
Correct.
I just wanted to
Correct.
clarify that. 'cause
And
it
any
made it
other,
sound as though
agency in town, whether
any
it's fire
application was coming
marshal
to
or
the town board,
whatever.
every application was coming to the town board, so I just wanted to clarify that, that's all.
No, none of what comes before the different boards is changing,
Yeah,
it's
this
just the
I
process
thought
of
this
doing
was really more about the multi-linked type application.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
They might need what I call all three approvals.
Yeah.
We're trying to fix the pitfalls and
Got it.
the larger coordinated review.
Yep.
I get it.
And these memorandums can be, simple and bullet item. For example, gee, we thought it was a great idea to renovate the restaurant. We're a little uncomfortable with the outdoor seating and its positioning next to residential property. So that everyone is thinking, well, that's a concern that should be addressed, by the applicant under the review. And remember, the secret review is really just a large review of all of the project's conditions and
Its impact.
considering what it might do under the environmental factors.
Yeah, it could be everything from noise to
Lighting,
garbage dumpsters,
noise,
you
yeah.
name it.
To character in the neighborhood.
All of it.
So, the planning board, so if it comes before the planning board and then the planning board says, we're gonna be lead agency because we have most of the actions on this application and town board really doesn't have any, special permits, nothing that's, we're waiting for from the town board. When SECRA is done and the planning board is lead agency and they're sending out to the other agencies for input, the town board would have input at that time?
If
Why
you-
wouldn't we be one of the agencies that's getting the
you
notice so
involve
that?
agencies, define as those agencies that have an authority over the application, or you have authority to take an action on that application, or you issue a permit on the application. If it's just a site plan or subdivision application that complies with zoning, the town board has no authority over that application. That authority has been given to the
What
planning
if we,
board.
what if we've issued covenants on the property?
Well, there's the problem where we have an agency, not naming names, issue covenants on an application that's binding upon, between the applicant and the town board. But now there's another agency involved that's gonna be issuing a site plan or a subdivision with it. And how do we coordinate those two
Do
applications
we
together?
become part of the agency that's involved then?
Maybe.
So that we'd have to codify that if we wanted to be
Right.
involved in that, is that,
And
or if you
that's-
can't do that?
That's what I'm getting at.
And how do we get, and this is where I'm looking, we've been having this discussion with Bob and
Look
the
at
dealers
it,
about
so-
it. How do we get that coordination between the planning board and its review to the town board to weigh in on it? And I don't know if we have an answer well-defined at this point.
Because part of my concern is that we get all the complaints from the outdoor music, from the traffic, from everything. So we're more in tune with certain areas in the town that are problematic, listening to the constituents. Whereas the planning board may not be as in tune with complaints that we've had in certain neighborhoods. So that's why I was wondering if, even though the town board didn't have an action and the planning board did deem themselves lead agency, and, how would the town board, how could the town board be brought into
This is
the
you.
loop?
I really think this is a matter that if we're going to pursue it, should be an executive session discussion because it's going to involve attorney-client advice, and I would not,
Well, this is not a particular project, we're saying if any property has a covenant on it.
right,
Right, and the covenant is whatever.
Right.
And they're going to go before the planning board.
okay,
And in what their application before the planning board involves, some restrictions from a covenant that the town has placed on it.
right.
Do we become an agency that is brought
part of
into
the
to the secret process?
Okay, my next question is, do we have something that we're anticipating they're going to do that's going
It
to
doesn't-
violate the covenant?
Well, that's the whole point of it.
Okay.
If we never are coordinated in that information that something's going on, how can we make a determination for the town board? Should we be weighing in on that? Because if we've placed a covenant on a
Right.
piece of property, right? So we're charged
So
with
they're
then.
they're aware that there's a covenant that
Yeah, right,
exists?
you would
Because
hope.
if you're telling me that the department, planning board, they're aware of it, so they know about it, they're bringing it out, they're already discussing it, they're vetting it.
I don't know,
Correct.
I don't know, that's the point, I don't know is that necessarily what happens in reality, or is there a loophole or a gap here that we're missing, that needs to be addressed?
Yeah.
Like, should.
That's
can-
right.
The most recent application, we addressed it in the staff report and cited the covenant.
That's correct.
So, but the,
So it's a moot point then?
The
Right, so it's really a moot point, does the
So-
planning board have to work under the same guise that?
So if the planning board does approve something that is against the covenant, what is our recourse as a town board?
If
File an
you
Article
believe-
78
if
against
you
the planning
believe-
board.
Take an
Well,
action against them.
That would be one avenue, again, that's why I said we're starting to get into an
But,
area where
okay,
well,
I'm
let's
really
say-
uncomfortable
Okay,
with the
so that's
discussion
fine.
going down this
That's,
path. I
that,
really
that's,
am.
that's fine, but
We gotta be careful.
it's not on a particular, it's not
I
on,
understand that,
okay, that's
I
fine.
understand that.
We'll follow, we
But
can
it
take
could-
that.
but you're talking about legal action or potential legal
No, I'm not
action.
talking, okay,
And I just don't think this is the venue to have that discussion, again, with
I have
all
a
due
question
respect.
about, something that was raised the other night about the, record keeping on the covenants, restrictions, and all that. Can they be memorialized on the Mylars?
Or cited as the covenants are
On the file?
That
That
would
would
be nice.
sometimes be 2 pages long, the
Well, we
covenant.
would
but
have-
still
you would have all the
cited that,
covenants
that it's
attached to
there.
it.
You could just put the recorded
Correct.
information on the.
Yeah, I mean, you could do what they do with subdivisions,
Subject.
Right.
yeah,
You don't cite them, word for word, you just have the reference number.
covenants recorded at page, library page,
Right.
yeah,
Date,
yeah.
and you can write that in a Sharpie. If you wanted to.
Right, well, I mean, then, when the Mylar is signed, then it's actually part of the site plan approval.
Correct.
In its final form, and there's no wiggle room about.
Going back and
where
looking,
is-
trying to
where
find
can we
something.
find it?
Yeah.
So how would we enact that? Does that have to be part of a, is that a policy, or is that
Well,
part of a resolution
what the
that we
town-
have to
What the
record?
town board did is we changed the site plan process to require a full title report, which would
Correct.
would include any covenants, restrictions, and easements,
Correct.
and anything, any lien holders on the
Right.
properties, everything, it includes everything that's
Right.
against the property. So, the full title report, and sometimes they can be this big, which they are with EPCAL,
How big?
Yep.
I'm sorry,
Um,
I was over here. How big?
this big,
Oh, okay.
but sometimes the covenants and restrictions get lost in the middle of the title report. So,
That's why if it's on the Mylar, then it's sort of just a tick to say, you need to
wait a
find
second.
it.
But
There might be
title
something-
companies can do a CNR search for a piece of property, and
Mm-hmm.
they can do that at the county center. So that can be a separate report on top of the title report as a CNR search that just has all the covenants and restrictions and easements and everything. Or, you just have to dig through the title report to try and find any covenants and
Well,
restrictions
why
and
not
easements.
just put it on the Mylar so they know to look for it?
If what Dawn had suggested was located somewhere, when an application is reactivated years later, or a revised site plan comes in because there's a new property owner, it might help
Changing
us.
use or whatever, anything.
But as
See,
we
Just
review
an
an
FYI.
application, we review the title report and see if there are any covenants, restrictions imposed upon it. So putting on the Mylar, at that point, it's already a moot point, because they've already been filed. And so we're reviewing something new that's gone beyond that. So, but there are new ones imposed.
New ones.
But that's that's a condition of in the resolution, saying they have to file a new covenant.
correct.
So if there's another application after that, that new title report with that next generation of application, in that new title report will reference that
Previous.
previous covenants and all the other covenants that have been imposed.
Well, on the new ones, have they ever, do we know they've been filed?
Yeah, we get a copy,
That
yeah.
was the question.
Yep.
Usually before the Mylar sign.
Correct.
But in the case of Peconic Care, where they're gonna do the land clearing, the covenants haven't been filed yet. So, and the site plan will be approved, and they'll get their building permit, and the covenants haven't been recorded yet. So, that's where we start running into problems, and that was my concern with the Peconic Care, in just not going through the process as it's laid out in the site plan guidelines. Because, now we're going for building permits for land clearing, and the covenants haven't even been recorded yet.
Anyway,
All right.
All right,
I wanna thank Carissa, you did a great job, flicking through those, it was nice to see you again.
Good job, Carissa.
hey, it didn't crash this time, so. The next thing that, I came away with the meeting, and it was going into the meeting, and it was reinforced at the meeting, is we need to do a better job of tracking applications. As Jody pointed out, when a constituent has an issue with an application or has a complaint against an application, they don't call planning board members, they usually call the elected representative, which is usually one of you, and then I get the phone call, Jeff West Island with this application. Then I have to go to the planner, pull out the file and find out where we are in the application review process. We use word processing for tracking applications right now, and the ideal thing is to use the BAS software like the building department, fire marshal to track applications, so that anybody can click on a computer, look on the tax lot number and see, oh, there's a site plan application pending, it's had a public hearing.
See where it's at.
See where it's at. That's a budgetary issue, and hopefully we'll get that done. In the meantime, this is what we're doing now. This is just an example on special permits that are pending.
Plan B.
But this is informative, but it is labor intensive.
Right. So, the supervisor and I had a conversation on the phone the other day about the workflow program and about getting planning on the BAS system, and I know that she is,
I
gonna
can speak for
hopefully.
myself, so you speak for yourself, I can speak for myself.
I have asked her to include it in the budget for next year so that we can get that software program for planning and the workflow program, so that it just kicks it from one department to the other, so that when planning staff is done doing the review, or when Jeff's done doing his secret review, it kicks it back to the planner, and that's how the workflow program works. So I'm hoping that she will include it in her budget, and that's what I discussed with her in our phone conversation the other day.
There was a grant that came up.
Well, it's our budget, first of all, it's everybody's budget,
Maybe
so,
you could
okay.
push for software,
But yes,
and
I
I'm not
agree
sure.
that we do need the software, but in the interim, this process that Jeff has been doing does give us some way to follow and track what's going on. So, what Jeff would like to do is share this with us, so that we all have access to this. In the meantime, we'll put it on a shared file, for the town board, so that everybody can go in and see what's going on with each thing. So,
Good.
this is a meantime stopgap till we can, move forward with a software program.
Yeah, well, this really doesn't, I mean, it tells us what the application is and what they're proposing, but it doesn't tell us, you know, when we're getting complaints saying, well, I filed it in, like, I always ask you for the backflow. I wanna know the date the application came in, where we are in the review process, has it been looked at yet? You know, is it coming up for review? It's been 6 months, I know you're short-staffed, so we need to, you know, address certain items, but I would really like to see a chronological timeframe on the application, so that we know that when an applicant calls and says, oh my God, I submitted my site plan application, and, you know, my final site plan application, and it hasn't been reviewed for 2 months, and then we have the chronological timeframe to say, well, we asked you 3 months before you resubmitted your site plan, so why did it take you 3 months to resubmit?
All right, so we can see if we can come up maybe with an Excel sheet, a better system for that in the meantime, till we get the software in. I know one of the other things, other issues that came up with was signs. I'm a little, with the signs, I know that the Architectural Review Board, does the signs, reviews the signs, they're an advisory board, and then it goes to your department, and then they approve.
If it complies with all the zoning criteria, meets the dimensional setbacks, size of the sign, has the ARB recommendation, we issue a permit.
So you're really just doing nothing to do with the compliance with the code, other than the setbacks and size?
Whatever was in the code, that's it.
So they review each or do they just take the
Sue Edwards is our sign person.
Mhm.
She reviews it versus the sign code. Brad may look at them also if there's a question about it. They get referred to ARB, and they look at it in terms of aesthetics, and then it goes back for issuance of a permit.
Okay, and in the ARB, are you doing the aesthetics, or are you doing size and everything else? Do you determine, if it meets the appropriate size, or does it go back and forth, or normally when it comes from the ARB, it's good to go when you guys get it?
Once we get a decision by the ARB, that's it.
That's what I'm wondering, so you basically issue it based on the ARB, but they're an advisory board, so should it be going somewhere else? Because you're having an advisory board, make the determination that they're in compliance, and then they put it up.
So I wanna give this sort of an alternate view, that this is a permit. This is sort of a subsection of a permit that goes to the building department. So when the sign application comes in, in theory, the building department could issue it as a building permit. So we actually have an additional step or prong by sending it to the ARB. So I'm not sure why you'd wanna add another layer or another.
I don't need to,
board.
I'm just trying to figure
Okay.
out how it works, so
Okay.
it's just
It's
a permit,
yeah.
okay,
It-
and then,
I mean, I think you would take it under the general category, that this is a permit, this is a type of permit, there's a building permit, there's demolition permit, there's a sign permit, and it would come under that general umbrella, so, unless you disagree, Jeff. I mean, I think that's the way it is. But in this case, because you have the aesthetics and because some of the other concerns, it gets the additional referral to ARB
okay.
to make sure that they're comfortable with it. They issue their response, which is either an approval with conditions, approval with conditions, or deny.
It's an advice.
Yeah,
Right, which is why
but if it's a
having
denial,
sat
then it
with
doesn't go
the,
forward.
having sat with the Architectural Review Board for the last 8 years, it's very frustrating for them, because they are advisory, and sometimes they make recommendations, and then those recommendations would go, get put in a file, and then the planning board would review the applications and not even acknowledge the recommendations by the ARB, but
But
Jeff's
that's what I'm
been-
saying, the planning board, basically what's being said here is the planning board does not review signs at all, other than setback and size. Other than that, because unless the ARB is making, if they're in compliance with the setback and size, that's, the planning board is reviewing that, and that alone, nothing else.
Right, but that's part of the problem too, is that when the applications come to the ARB, they're not seeing the site plan, so they don't know where the sign is going to be on the property and what visual impact it may have to a road or to, and the ARB also looks at whether or not there are any emblems on the sign, such as a smiley face, or a phone number, or an email address, or.
So should the site plan be completed prior to approval of the signs by the ARB, is that generally how it works?
Yes.
The ARB,
Okay.
right, the ARB gets,
So they will know where it is.
We've changed it, because the ARB now does the recommendation before the site plan is approved.
So how can they
They-
make a recommendation before this, if they don't know where the sign's gonna be, for its aesthetic quality?
Well, a lot of times,
That doesn't make
and,
sense.
well,
No,
no, cause
Good
when,
question.
when they file a site plan application, then Karen will send them a memo, or Greg will send them a memo saying you need architectural review board, or you need landmarks preservation. So then they would come to those boards for either an approval, a denial, or a recommendation, and then that goes back, and
So are they seeing them before secret's done?
Well, that's something I wanted to speak to,
No.
because, it- we're talking about signs, but for the entire building itself and its architectural review. And I know they're advisory, but if you look at the code, they have certain deadlines, right? That they must reach a decision to
Yes.
give back to an
Yes,
applicant.
right.
And
Costs
that
people a lot of money.
conflicts with secret, in my view, because if the project is undergoing a more extensive environmental review, and the ARB is told you have 90 days to issue your decision on the facade and comments, recommendations, whatever it is, there may be a larger visual impact or community characteristic that is required, or at least being looked at under secret. And then the applicant, the Architectural Review Board is under a different time frame, and the applicant says, well, they already approved this, or recommended, and we're
So
just
did-
seeing, we're maybe just catching up to that because of our backlog, and I
Well,
say,
the one
well,
thing
you
is-
can't approve it because we haven't even gotten through secret yet.
So
Well,
where
you
should
know
it sit in the process?
When the architectural review board does review site plan applications in terms of the building aesthetics, the colors, materials, how it sits on the property, they review landscaping.
they only see renderings, they don't see site plans.
They do in some instances, because the New Jerusalem Church came in, and they're now in for final. I'm sending them back to ARB, because they gave a preliminary, recommendation. And one of the things they did not like was the landscaping plan, because it included too many invasive and ornamentals, and they wanted to see more of a native plant mix. So they are taking a look at the whole design concept of the aesthetics from the outside. So when the church gets its approval and they want their sign, the ARB will be reminded, hey, you guys reviewed the site plan application, and now they wanna put a sign up, let's see, at that point, it's a permit, as Bob said, it's a
Right.
building permit. It's a type 2 under SECRA. hopefully they remember, and when we send the application over, they remember that, hey, by the way, you reviewed this site plan application, this is what you want to put the sign, does it match in terms of design and context of the architecture of the building that you guys looked at previously?
But I think more to the bigger projects. So the timeline doesn't, because if you have secra and you have, you know, character in the, you know, somebody gives a site, a building, and it has, you know, your part of your EIS is that you want to know that it's gonna fit in the character of the community, and they're at the ARB, and they're changing the building, the whole character, maybe possibly the way the building looks, how does that then go back into what you requested in your scope? Nothing, you're gonna have somebody pay a lot of money to
Yeah,
go
right,
back
you
and do
can't-
something twice.
Some
Yeah,
sort of
but
the applicant.
It really is, so maybe it should, you know, before the architectural review board sees these plans, the secret, you know, should start.
I
And
agree.
its scoping should be done before the architectural review board, gets a project.
In the beginning, and that's what I'm saying, when the
That is the
notification,
beginning.
when the notification goes out that secret review is underway and it's a coordinated review, the ARB and the Landmarks Preservation Commission should be included, and I saw it in your bullets, in your slide.
So
But
when the
I don't think
application-
that they're getting it.
Well, when it comes in, remember, couple things. That, you know, 13 copies are distributed, and each one of these entities has their own backlog and time to review, comments, schedule hearings.
And something about meeting, like the
computer
ARB
program
or
sounds like
Landmark
it
may
would
meet
be a
once
blessing,
month.
to have us understand where it is, because I'm not here every day, and so I may be looking at an application that they've already processed, or halfway processed.
I think
So
that,
it's really unfair to the applicant.
And-
well, it's unfair also to the, I mean, when they're so far into the site plan process, and they've already submitted the renderings through the site plan process as to what the building is gonna look
But
like,
why
and the
would they do-
architectural design has essentially already been done, and then it comes to the ARB, and they're like, well, wait a second, what is this?
And
You
in
know?
other instances, the ARB the applicant has leapfrogged the process and gone to the ARB and come up with a design, and is kind of hesitant to keep changing it as the process goes forward, even though,
It's too confusing, if we're
It
not
is.
understanding it, how can we expect an applicant to understand it?
Right.
So I think that we need to take a look at the plan for the architectural review board, where it falls in the process,
Right.
and make the flow chart for the secret, and then we need to agree on that, and, because you can put that in the code also for the environmental, where the steps, or you don't normally do that in the
That could
code?
be in the.
There could be a
generalized.
procedure,
In-
generalized.
Plan together, you guys.
And the architectural review requirements may be for type twos. I have no problem with the timeframes that they have, but anything that's an unlisted action or a type one, those timeframes wouldn't comply with SEQR, and so that in our own code, we're conflicting with the law.
Okay.
But in your
We'll take a look at
secret
that.
review, if the Landmarks and the ARB got a copy of it when you were distributing it out to all the other agencies, I guarantee you would have comments back for them within 2 weeks, because they do it by email.
I would say more often, they've already reviewed it before I've completed SEQR.
Which
Really?
can't happen.
Because,
Shouldn't happen.
because, remember, I'm looking at many more applications than just landmarks and architectural requirements. Everything that comes before the town board, and everything for the CBA, and anything for CDA, plus.
and coastal applications,
And coastal
and
applications.
wetland
So
applications.
My backlog is different than theirs.
You're right.
And they're gonna proceed, which, you know,
Right, in
they
their course of
understand
business.
they should, they have an agenda. I'm not arguing with that, they have to keep it on the agenda for an extended period of time until we have all of this coordinated out, especially on the bigger projects.
Okay, so we can
That's something that
get
we gotta look
a
at too.
flow chart, and figure out how that works.
Yeah, and that can dovetail nicely into the new chapter on SECR as well.
Okay.
We want your opinion yet on the sign.
Yeah, that's
all
just
it's secret.
That's the abbreviated version.
And then
We
one of
gonna
the
talk
other
about
things that came out of the meeting also is just, so community outreach, to have a flow chart, the guide, I mean, we talked about that a little bit, to make it a little
And that's
bit
what
easier.
Catherine was just pointing out.
Especially when it's things that somebody's just coming in for a permit for a shed, a building permit for a shed and things like that, make it very easy for people to come in and be able to know exactly what they have to do and what they have to
Yeah,
comply with.
90% of the people that come in are, seeking permits, their applications are type 2. and
Yeah.
we can avoid the whole secret process with them because it's a type 2 action.
Give me a
and that's-
check, get out
that's-
the door, go ahead.
Yeah, give us your $100, give us your application fee, give us.
That's right. Give me a pencil drawing, get out.
But see, that's part of the problem too, because when you have covenants that were put on a piece of property, and then it's already an existing building, and then they come back 10 years down the road, and they wanna do an interior renovation, and they wanna add something inside the building, that there's a covenant against it.
For a commercial application, that would typically trigger some sort of, it would require a building permit.
It wouldn't
Brad
require
said, can I
secret.
issue a building permit without any sort of planning board action? So that would trigger the
Title search.
title search.
Right, but if there's no site plan application, because they already have an approval for the building, and they already have the parking lot built, they already have the stormwater, the drainage, everything's done, the site plan was approved 10 years ago, covenants were put on it, and then they come into the building department for an interior alteration, you're not going through that process that happened 10 years ago,
It's
you're just
only-
issuing a building permit.
Right, very rarely does that happen, and I'll give you the one classic example, is with the former Wallbounds and ShopRite's coming in. It's a simple swap out between one supermarket and another, does not require any planning board approval, not require a title search, it's a type 2 action under SECR. That's a really rare thing to have.
Right, but-
Usually,
but-
Remember
if
the-
it's going from office to,
Well, when is it gonna be shop right?
Yeah, but if they're gonna put a cafe inside the
Every once in a
shopping,
while, everybody's
inside
asking
the
me.
supermarket, and there was never a cafe there before, then it's not triggering site plan, they're
but there
just
was-
getting a
there was
permit
one there
for a
before.
kitchen. I know, but I'm saying if there
there
isn't,
wasn't.
like in Target, you know, in Target, they put a little sitting area, and they have the little like.
Starbucks.
Right, so,
So the type 2, just remember that that's a classification and a determination that there's no, visible environmental impact. It just means that the decision can proceed. The decision can still be denied for other reasons.
but I'm saying that they're not coming to the site plan, they're not triggering SECR because they're doing an interior alteration.
Everything requires
No, they'll
secret, you
still
have to
file
make a
a short,
determination.
they'll still file a short environmental assessment.
Even for a building permit for an interior renovation, I don't think so.
very rarely,
I
if
get 'em
it's,
for
if it's.
houses and decks.
Yeah, that's what, we're talking commercial versus residential. If it's
Right.
Residential, type 2, we don't worry about it. Commercial, if it's an interior alteration,
But you make a determination that it's a type 2, it's always looked at, and a determination is made where it falls.
yeah, and Brad
Yeah,
has,
classification.
Brad
Right,
has,
yeah, classification, everything is
Under-
always,
under the
everything
list.
receives a classification.
Not for a building permit for an interior renovation of a commercial building.
that is correct, and Brad looks at that, makes a decision, is it the same use? If it's a different use, no, then that bumps it either to a use permit, or it's gonna trigger site plan, because it's a different use, it's gonna require different parking, it's gonna require different something. I'll give you, I don't wanna give you
But
the
it's-
application name, but you have a certain sports store that's been vacant for a long time, where you have somebody that wants to come in and partition a part of it off and put in a food-related establishment within it, without getting into much detail. This
Chick-fil-A.
require a site plan, it's interior alteration, but this will require interior alteration permit, but now that's gonna trigger, Brad will not issue a permit on that until they go through site plan review, because now they have to bring in the lighting into compliance, it's gonna use signage, they're gonna change the outside architecture. So something similar,
But
it's
it's a
just interior
different
alteration,
use.
it's not just an interior alteration.
But it's a different use, so that makes sense.
It's retail to retail.
But that's a zoning code use oriented issue under SECR because it's under 4,000 square feet as a commercial space,
Right.
non-residential, under 617.5C, I think it's 7.
Remember
It
that.
would fall under the type 2 category by its categorical
Right, but what I'm
exclusion.
saying is that you can get an interior alteration, and it may be deemed type 2, but
And Brad does it.
without a full site plan review, you wouldn't know that there were covenants filed on it 10 years before.
Yes, right, so what would trigger,
That- yes.
what would trigger?
That's
That's what I'm
the
saying.
problem.
If
Yeah.
it's part of
So-
a larger commercial establishment, like a shopping center, Brad would pull out the building permit file and see if there's any filed covenants on
So
it.
I guess, is there any expediency that we could put to the process, so that if there was a covenant filed when somebody came in, that we, to somehow trigger that there is one on that
One of the
property
things that
or
Brad would look at, and I
parcel?
wish he was here, but if he looked at a building permit interior alteration, he's gonna pull the building permit file, he's gonna also check the site plan file, was there a site plan on this? he's pretty savvy with that. And then he would go see if there's anything in the title report about it. He does a pretty thorough review on those things.
He does, but there may be a time when he's not here anymore. And,
We're
you
not
know,
letting him
we
go.
wanna keep him forever, but he's gonna retire
it's gonna be
eventually.
a
We
rough-
can look if there's some way to just, you know, make that a little bit easier to do, and we'll just charge you with that to see if there's a possibility that you
Right,
could.
but
do with
keeping in
that.
mind too, that the software program, if there are any covenants and restrictions that are
That would-
filed against an application, all he would have to do is type in the tax map number and any covenants would pull
We'll
up.
pop up and say there's a covenant.
Yep,
Yeah.
Well, obviously, having a
So-
tri-board meeting and then having this discussion is in the right direction, because if if all the boards don't agree and there's some confusion, I imagine how challenging it is for the applicant. I think we need to I thought the tri-board meeting went well, I thought we should do it again. And John had mentioned maybe having it at Suffolk Community where we can all be around one big table or somewhere like that.
And Laura had other things on the agenda we didn't have time to get to. so.
Right.
Yeah, and I think what we'll do is we will, move forward with trying to come up with a chapter for the environmental review. Once we can get that kind of nailed down, get some input from the other boards on that, and then I think we can hold another meeting, once we have that for everyone to review that, see if we can, and move forward with that.
So are we
So-
clear on can we maybe just recap the recommendations or the weak areas that we identified?
So the
that
one-
we
We're gonna create a new
move
chapter for
forward
secra.
and see what we agree on and see that we can move forward and get something
Yeah,
done.
it's an imperfect system that needs a lot of work.
So,
Well,
but
we
we'll
know-
move
that's
on.
the general
One is
comment.
the chapter on the environmental review, we'll go with that.
Yep.
Communications with secret moving through the board, we'll do through an MOU.
Yep.
Between the different boards. We will look at the ARB, timeframe for reviewing projects and how that relates to the secret process that we'll be implementing. Need to come up with a few, flow chart for the community, for outreach and to be able to put on the website so that we could have that, a little bit more accessible. And then we will also, we'll take a second look and maybe you guys can report back if you feel that there's any other way for record keeping for covenants that would just trigger, people to let them know swiftly that there is a covenant on the property and to, look out for that.
and then also the public scoping process for secra was something else that we had discussed.
Yeah, that would go into the chapter on environmental review. We
Yeah,
would put that in
that's
there.
gonna require
Yeah,
a little bit of review and then bring it back to you with our recommendations on
Now
formatting
is
and content.
Now is the software as a wish list thing, the software, the EAS that you keep?
Yes.
IPS
Because I
system.
did, I went to that grant conference and there was a grant, I'm gonna talk about it with Dawn, I have the paperwork that people are using for software, so perhaps that
Yeah,
might
we did
help.
get $100,000 for this, towards the software with the Zombie Home grant. So, you know, those grants are available and they are out there and I think it's a good idea. We
So
should be
Don
looking for
burns
those.
on you to get us money.
I would have-
Just go like that.
Like we did for the zombie homes, where we got the grant to pay for the software and then to pay for the town attorney to do the justice court and the review process, so just seeking out grants
See if
like
we can
that.
get money for us to get
Yeah,
a
at the
planning module.
Association of Towns, they brought up some grants for software, so I'm gonna touch base with you on that.
That'd be great.
so guys, thank you very much. This is really helpful in moving the process forward, so.
Oh, it was a great start.
Even my head hurts.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, Jeff and John.
Thank you, Jeffries.
Thank you, guys.
Jefferson.
And
Jeffries. When does this stop right come in anyway, or shop right with?
Well, if you listen to the Riverhead Local.
That's Jim's takeaway.
No, I don't read Red Local, I'm asking you.
Right.
So it sounds like you're being delayed. Is it your fault?
You don't have an application yet.
I don't read local.
So next we'll have Bill come up. I hope you guys have your, you have one of these? You have your.
I have it in my office.
They were like, we're
Let
gonna
me
be
see
over.
what,
We haven't even seen any
It's the short one.
okay.
So you have copies of it?
I do.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Of what?
I have it in my office.
I'm not doing the report, I'm doing the comments, right?
Yes, correct.
They are something, right?
As far as I know, yes.
Oh, you're not
I'm
doing
doing
it
the
on
comments.
There's been no movement on that.
this?
Yes.
So
I don't know.
this is we had the auditors come and present, they presented our 2016 financials. So I asked Bill to come because there was, a few comments in there. And the point of the comments is then to review how they're being addressed and if there's anything that we need to implement, for addressing those comments, or how they're being, what we're doing and how to follow up on them,
Who's
so.
going to jail, Bill?
Nobody.
Good. I like
That's
that.
the right answer, right?
Yeah,
That is always the right answer.
Okay.
All right,
So just,
yeah, we'll start with you'll go in order.
yeah, the little feedback.
Yeah.
Um,
Larry, there's just some feedback.
So just to go back to, we'll go back to 2007 quickly, to that audit. I just want to refresh the memories of people who aren't here, explain what happened back then. We had a 2007 audit, 7, 8, and 9, 3 audits were done in 1 year in 2010. The reason for that is the 2006 audit did not have $75 million worth of capital assets in it. So when we rolled forward and went to ABZ, and now we did an audit in 2007, we had to add $75 million worth of assets.
Thank God you weren't in the 2% tax.
Well, adding assets is
Yeah.
easy, they just
Yeah.
were never reported as assets.
Yeah.
Okay? So we did that, we got caught up with ABZ in 7, 8, and 9. They were all 3 of those were issued in 2010, because we had to go back and do them one at a time. Okay? The 2007 audit had 17 major comments, of which we methodically took the quickest ones off that we could and worked towards that. The 2015, there's only 3 remaining in the 2016 comments that were from 15 or prior, okay? And then there's 3 new ones in 2016. So I'll go over all 6 of them one at a time.
And just out of curiosity, I know that you had put this one up on the website, but the other ones are not up on the website. What, this is called,
Okay. I'll have to see I have that.
the short reference one.
So we'll start with the first one, software. We're basically done with this. I mean, I know we have some tweaks in here, but if you look at the conditions, there's 3 conditions. The first one is a 30-year-old software program. That's what we started. That's Edmunds has replaced that now in 18. That mainframe, we will not have any support for that after April, so all of the programs on that mainframe will be off by April of this year. The biggest one being the accounting program, which was taken off January of this year.
What about the, not the fleet management, but the,
We have another program that we're having to do. Edmunds has a program that we're not happy with, and part of the agreement to go with Edmunds, if we weren't happy, if they weren't gonna do what we needed to, then we didn't have to take that module. So we didn't, and we have another module, that's cloud-based that we are going to, put together in the next couple of weeks, and then, get ready for April 1st.
And what will that module do?
It's gonna bill out, it's gonna, keep track of all the inventory in municipal garage and bill it out to the other departments when we do repairs. So it'll take the labor and materials and then, and the fuel that's sold to other departments and keep track of that and bill it out. Which is what our fleet management does now.
right, and that was like a $80,000 program, right? The software program?
No, the amount on Edmunds, Edmunds in total was $76,000. And I think we have about $8,000 was allocated for that, but the software that we're going with, is less than that
For the fleet management?
for the fleet management.
Okay.
And on Edmunds, just what's the yearly on that?
I have to go back and look. The first year of maintenance is free, and it's typically about 15%. If you're not hosting it, we're hosting it, not them, so it would be about 15% of what we eventually purchase. So again, we had a $76,000 program, but we didn't take the fleet management. So it's gonna be something
So take
short of that.
8 or 9,000 out of it, okay.
But that won't be the yearly will be about 15% of
Then
that.
whatever, okay.
Okay. Second one, third-party consultants, we're not.
Just one more thing about the software. So between the Edmunds and whatever the outside one, that will, if we have those 2, this will take this off, or are there still other programs that we're short, that need to be implemented over the next couple of years?
A is done with.
So A will be,
Yeah,
okay.
when Edmunds and Edmunds is implemented, when we take the fleet management off there, then that will be done.
And the plan for that is April?
Yes.
Okay.
And the scavenger waste too, right, or,
That's not on the mainframe.
okay,
Everything that was on the mainframe has been taken off. Tax receiver
Yeah.
has BAS now, so.
good.
The second one, third-party consultants, unfortunately, we still do rely on some, but coming off of the mainframe, we rely on less. There are certain, I'm gonna call it legacy programs that we have for certain departments,
that, have been written by a consultant. We do need to, move them either off of those programs or have someone else back those programs up. That's one of the processes that we will be doing with Total Technology, the new IT consultants. Seeing how, if nothing else, we have someone else. We had an instance a couple of years back where, a program went down in the town clerk's office on a Friday afternoon. Thankfully, they were only down for a couple of hours, and they had to manually report all their receipts or collect all their receipts. And the consultant actually had to come here over the weekend and take care of that and fix it by Monday. We can't have it where we have one consultant that wrote the program, the only one that can fix it, so. I think that was the door, yeah. But there's a couple of departments that have those. They build these programs that really work well for those departments and make their job a lot easier. So we should have them, but we shouldn't be relying on one consultant, especially if it's a consultant of one, not a firm,
Right.
to do some of this stuff. So
Newcastle, baby.
right, so that's one of the things that, Total Technologies is gonna recommend. We don't have as many because we are off the mainframe, so we did have one consultant that did all of our programming for that. Because we did not have, if you read in the comment, we did not have a, maintenance agreement with the software because software company was out of business. So we had a programmer come in and.
So April 1st, 18 off the mainframe, that is not a realistic date with the Total Technologies, or they're just gonna have a plan by then?
No, the mainframe, will be done with the mainframe.
On April 1st?
The biggest hurdle
This
is
is
getting
ma-
the receiver off there, but.
But with the legacy programs, where do they sit?
So the mainframe portion is
That's,
done.
that's
Done.
the fleet.
The only thing we need to do is have that consultant download all of the information, all of the data into another, onto some other device, whether we have it as in an Access database, so we can.
And that's what Total Technology is figuring
No,
out?
no, that's what that consultant's gonna do. He's a programmer, he's gonna program and take all of that data, and we're gonna put it on a different platform, whether it's an Access database or a SQL database, depending on the volume of that, which one would run smoother. Just so we have access to the historical data for the last 6 years is where we're going to,
Okay.
okay? So that's the last piece to come off of there, but we're not functioning on it, and we're not adding any new data to the mainframe, other than the garage. So once we take vehicle maintenance off, we're done with that completely. So, but if you look at that comment, there's two parts of it. The second one was, Windows applications. Those are some of the legacies that we're talking about. Where are you? I'm on number B, on letter B for number
Page
one.
3 at the
Okay.
top.
Condition, the second condition?
The-
Page 3?
Page 3, it says.
Oh, I'm on 4,
Yeah,
that's
so
why,
where are
okay,
they?
that's why, I'm like,
on
what?
I'm way
I
ahead
know,
of
I'm reading
Yeah.
on page 4, I'm like,
Ahead
is
of
that
you
making,
folks.
okay.
I can
All
read.
Okay, so then the last one, disaster recovery. We have a couple of things that we've done for that. We went with Office 365 and ADP, which is in the cloud, so we don't lose that information. If something happened here in the town, they have disaster recovery plans, both those companies, obviously. So those have been fixed. We still have some issues with stuff that reside here. We keep information and we back it up, but nothing's 50 miles away or more than 50 miles away. That's one of the processes we're gonna go through with Total to see how we do that, whether they keep a backup file or whether someone else keeps a backup file in Tennessee or wherever it may be of our data. We do back the data up, it's just not more than 50 miles away.
Can Total Tech then write the plan up for that?
Yes.
Okay, so that we have a copy of that?
Right. Okay, so that's number one. The second finding, and this is, we spoke about this a little bit, the other day with AVZ. There is, and this will actually tie into one of the new comments. We do pay back our receivables and payables between, funds, which is called an inter-fund loan. We pay them back on a regular basis. What winds up happening is in November, December, when certain funds start running out of cash, we loan cash from one fund to another. Those are all insignificant at this point. They weren't always that way, but they are now, except for that $850,000 for EPCAL. So I can explain a little bit more of that if you wanna move down to that comment, or I can explain a little bit more about that when we get to that comment. Okay, it's the $850,000 that we spent at ball fields, and the bond has since expired, so we can't use that as revenue.
How many other findings did they find to this one? Just, it was that one I know was the big one, but,
Yeah, that was it. They're both related. We can't pay the money back, cause we
But-
don't, ahead.
But the interfund receivables and payables, right?
Yeah.
So how many did we have that way? How many did they note on that? 1, 2, 10,
Well, they're just
15?
making a general comment, there are plenty of
But-
interfund,
I know, but I'm just curious how many of them there were.
oh, I'd have to get a schedule, but it would be normal for that to happen. The thing is, it has to be short-term, you can't loan a fund money for 4 years. You're really loaning them money for a month, for 60 days, you know, until they collect their taxes at the beginning of the year. So, there may be 10 other funds that have loaned money back and forth. That's not material, and this comment would not have been made based on that, because if we loaned it to them in November or December, and then it was paid back in January, that's the whole purpose of an interfund loan.
Right, but what I'm saying is it's supposed to be paid back at the close of the year, correct?
No, I mean, because you can,
But no later than the close of the year. That's the criteria.
if the fund,
General municipal law provides the criteria under which interfund cash advances can be made and must be repaid. Repayment must be made as soon as monies are available, but no later than the close of the year. So my question is, are you, at the end of the year, you're doing, I'm not sure what you're doing that they're not closed out at the end of the year.
there's no funds to close them out.
Okay, that's what-
We may collect your January revenues on December 28th, okay, from the
So,
tax.
so you,
receipt.
so you're not meeting the budgeted items at the end of the year?
Potentially,
Okay,
we'd have to look at each one of those loans.
but that's what's happening.
Most of these loans, though, that are still on the books are ones that we may be loaning for a capital project, from the sewer district to sewer capital, or water to water capital.
Well,
I'll
that's
go
why I
back
was
and
wondering,
give
what's
you a list.
general fund and what's
I'll
special,
give you a
yeah.
list.
But like that was part of the problem with the audits from 2007, 2008, 2009, why they couldn't get done, because all of these inter-agency money transfers were going from department to department, and then they were labeled as one thing and they were something else, and we had to spend a lot of money to get somebody into the accounting office and to make all the journal entries.
Yeah, but this
But-
is 6 years later, so what it
Yeah,
is
but the
is you have.
850,000 is still there from 2007, 2008,
But
and
aside from
2009.
the- That's what I'm asking.
I'll give you a
Aside
list
from
of
the
that.
850,000, at the end of the year, everything should be balanced out. So if you have 15 general fund items that are not, the interfund transfers have not been paid out, that means your budget from that year has not paid your bills.
Well,
That's
And some
what
of
I'm
them,
saying.
like I said, are carried over from 2000.
But that's what, they're not allowed to do that. That's why we have this finding.
No, I understand what
Everything
you're
has, the
saying,
books have to be
but,
closed out at the end of the year with the budget. That's what is the criteria, and that's what the significant deficiency is, because our books are not closed out at the end of the year.
Bill.
Yeah.
Are we doing that? Are you doing that internally? That resolution that we adopted last night saying that you can, you know, spend up to $7,500 and transfer money from
Can't-
one
No,
account,
that's
one
not
by.
this.
But
not
you're,
this.
no, but you're confusing cash with the authority to spend money. We pay the employee retirement system bill in December, okay? That bill actually is paid through March 31st. Why do we do that? Their calendar year is April 1st to March 31st. We get a discount by paying it in December. So we're paying $5 million in December, of which $1.25 million of it is for the next year's fund. So that's a prepaid. It doesn't mean we overspent the budget, it's prepaid for
Well,
next
that's why,
year,
that's why
but we
wanna
needed
see
the
what
cash.
That's why we
Right.
wanna see what the
But
accounts
we needed
are.
the cash at that point for the prepaid.
Right, but that's why we wanna see what the accounts
So
are.
I'll give
These
you a
all
list of that.
can't be closed out by the end of the year, though, because you're waiting for money sometimes in January from December,
That's what he just.
so
Yeah.
No, but you can still record them. If you know, if you're still recording your receivables.
But it's not a receivables, our year doesn't start till the next year. So again, receivables versus prepaids, the receivable, the money we collect in December is really money for the next year, okay? Our calendar year is January to December, so anything that the tax receiver collects goes in as what's called a deferred revenue.
Right.
We don't earn it or recognize it until the following year.
Correct.
It does put cash in our coffers, so it helps us to offset the prepayment of the retirement system, okay? But there are accounts, I'll
Right, so
get you a
then,
list of the accounts.
but then that should be paid out of that money. If you're getting
If
money.
we have sufficient money,
Right,
yes,
so,
we would do
but
that.
they don't always have the sufficient money, so,
Correct.
so it's not.
I'll get you a
Thank you.
list of interfund loans at the end of the year.
all right, where it says, Bill, the town does not record interest or income expense between the funds as required when there is lending across tax jurisdictions.
Because the amount, if, we're not really loaning across tax tax jurisdictions. If you look at the money that, again, it's up to this board, who's gonna repay that $850,000. It's still all part of the general fund, because those capital projects, or that capital project, is being funded by the general fund. So the general fund would have earned money on that $850,000.
Right.
However, if there was bonds, they'd also be paying the debt on it. Since we can't bond money right now, then the general fund or the key money or the park and rec monies would be the monies that we're funding it from. If we simply took $850,000 out of fund balance and paid that fund, which is really what we did, we gave it cash but didn't record it as revenue to that fund or an expenditure to the general fund, the money would be sitting there. So we wouldn't be earning any more income because it's the responsibility of the general fund to pay that bill, okay? So that's why when we first, like I said before, if we have a sewer district capital project or a water district capital project, we pay them from those districts. We loan the money from those districts, because there is no interfund payable or receivable, it sits on the same taxpayer. So that's why we don't calculate that. So.
But why are they referring to it then?
Because we gotta look at that, we gotta look at the balances, what they are. That may have been a previous year one, it may have just been a comment that we should, calculation, we calculate it every year, which funds we have that loan other funds, it's always within the same fund, and if it's not, it's not material.
It could be a comment just based on the 850,000, because it keeps carrying over from year to year to year to year to year. It might just be that one item, or it could be others. So I think that we would all like to know
Again, I'll get
if
you
there
the
are
list.
others, loans that
And
are,
then you can see what
not being
money
paid
was
back.
loaned within the same taxing jurisdictions and outside that taxing jurisdiction.
Very exciting.
rivet.
Okay. Fund balance policy. That's really just a matter of the tax cap. We have a fund balance policy because it's recommended. It's recommended so that we have enough money to pay the bills, number one, in case there's a, something in a given year that we have not anticipated. It's recommended for Moody's, so when we go get a bond rating, that we get positive ratings. So we have a fund balance policy that states that we will attempt to keep 15% fund balance in all funds.
Down to about 5.
Right, so the decision of this board, of this administration, or previous administration, was to not raise taxes to drive people away and exceed the cap. So they did exceed the cap twice, but a reasonable amount, as opposed to increasing the.
But that was just for general, it didn't increase the fund balance, correct?
Well, the point is, even just to pay the bills, they didn't want to exceed the cap. They exceeded the cap twice to pay the bills, but they were not going to exceed the cap to keep a 15% fund balance. The whole reason for a fund balance is for a rainy day. So in the years when we couldn't pay the debt service, that's what the fund balance was used for. That was the rainy day. Doesn't make any sense to then increase the fund balance, increase the tax levy above the 2%, so you can maintain a 15% fund balance that you may need in a rainy day. So you're really kind of juggling two ends here. How much do you draw down so that you don't drive people out of the town, in particular businesses, because that's what we drive out first, versus how much do you draw down on your fund balance? So the town has one of two options here. Reduce your fund balance policy to 5% or whatever you want to do, and then see how Moody's responds to that, or keep it that way, and know that when you start paying down your debt, you will start increasing the fund balance, but you're not gonna increase it on the backs of the taxpayer.
But 4% isn't recommended. And what do you think we have, what is our fund balance today, you know?
Well, we won't know till we finish 2017. So I don't think we pulled much
But
money
you know
out.
what it, I mean, we know what our current fund balance is right now.
No, we don't, because we haven't paid all the bills. We
So-
don't know until we finish paying the bills. But what I can say is, if I'm gonna estimate where we were last year, as I said previously, I don't see us overspending or making much money in
I think
17.
we added some into our reserves.
But
this
we also-
year, like almost 600,000.
Yeah, we're gonna have, because I haven't moved money from fund balance in the general fund in any of the transfers I've asked for, I'm gonna say we lived within our budget. The next batch of bills that come in between now and March 31st will tell me exactly how much I've spent in 2017.
But we're coming off the landfill debt to the tune of about $700,000 a year as of now, correct?
It changes by year because
So
they
next year
come
it'll be
out
more,
by-
but this year it was about 700,000. So, and that money was budgeted for, to to pay bills,
And
So-
and we absorb that,
to not raise taxes
To not
and
raise
to stay under the cap.
yes.
But operating with a 4% fund balance is not recommended.
So the
Of
board,
course
this
I
is
mean, the
so.
board has a resolution of 15%.
That was our policy,
so-
right.
Yes.
It was our
Right.
policy, but I say we
No,
lower it
that's
to
why it's a
5%.
comment. So the board has to choose, do you want this comment again next year? Well, and you're gonna have it potentially anyway, because you're not increasing it in 2017, but if you don't want it in 18, then the board has to choose, do we raise taxes by $12 million, $15 million to remove this comment?
And it's 4%
it's
on your
down.
tax bill
Right.
for every $1 million. It's
So that-
4% on your
Run
tax
out.
bill for every $1 million, so you wanna raise taxes 40 or
So the
50%?
negative side to this is.
Well, that becomes the budget discussion.
Right.
So that's when we go into the budget, that's when that
Right,
gets.
but
that's when
I'm
that
just
gets
giving you the
discussed.
pros and cons to either side. The con, the
Well,
positive.
there's a lot of other pros and cons to this. I mean, you could have raised taxes slightly every year to keep your fund balance, to be able to pay down your bills, so you wouldn't have drawn on the fund balance, because you drew down, I mean, it was drawn down almost $10 million in the past 8 years. So you drew, the fund balance was
That's why
drawn down
when
on very, very heavily, with now not increasing the cost of the town bill. So it, you know, it's,
That's why- that's why it went down.
nuance to there than just that
Taxes went up
statement.
every single
Yeah,
year.
that's
But
why it
there's
went down,
nuance to
that's
it.
why it went
50
down from over 15% to the 4% that we have.
Yes.
Right, but
But-
we've underspent our budget, just
No,
about
but
every
but
year.
the other
you drew down
thing
fund
was-
balance $11 million.
Well,
But-
You better get
some
rid
of
of
that
this.
had to do with the CP,
Go on.
well, the CPF
No, it had
that
nothing
we,
to
Yeah,
do
no.
with the CPF.
so the CPF we drew down from.
Not, nothing to
I'm
CPF.
talking about the CPF account, if you would let me finish.
Yes.
Okay, so
Okay.
in the CPF account, we had 17 million, I think, in there when I first took office. And there was no money coming into the CPF, because we were only bringing in 3 million, but our debt was 6 million. So rather than, you know, raising taxes, which is what you're suggesting that we might have to do, in order
No, I'm
to
not
increase the
suggesting
fund
anything.
balance.
We're having a conversation. But the
Okay.
CPF fund is a separate fund by itself. So this, to pay the CPF fund, the money was drawn from the CPF fund. It had nothing to do with raising taxes, because the money for the CPF comes from the 2% tax on
Same
the sale of
scenario.
the house,
But-
and it's not from the
Which was
general
hopefully
fund.
Same
not-
scenario, I was just
It's- yeah,
giving
it's a
the
diff-
scenario.
It's a
So
different scenario.
if we wanna go back to the general fund, when we had more than 15% in fund balance, we were also $5 million short of a balanced budget.
Right.
So expenses actually were reduced over those years.
Yep.
And taxes were increased over those years to the tax cap, and the difference was taken out of fund balance. So the tax rate went up between 2% and 3% a year, and maybe 4% in one of the
Which
years
was
that we
the original
did.
plan,
that we
because when,
did.
in 2010, when we first took office, we were at a 12% deficit.
Right, so the taxes were increased as much as we could within the tax cap, to a point where we actually exceeded the tax cap, when we couldn't burn down any more fund balance. And the debt that we were paying, that was at $6 million a year in the general fund, $5.8 million a year, has been reduced every year. So the whole point was trying to get to the point where we have enough regular revenues to cover our regular operating expenditures, without burning down through all the fund balance. This is where we were. The last 2 years, we have broken even or made money. I think we broke even in 15, and we made money. We made $200,000 in 16.
Right.
Not a lot on 47 million, but we're not pulling away from fund balance. So we'll have the same challenge come 2018's budget. Where are we going?
But we,
That was with the interfund transfers, payables and receivables at the
Say that
with
again.
the interfund transfers, it was 200,000 after the interfund
The
receivables had
the interfund transfers has no effect.
but
on
it was done at the end.
The interfund transfers has no effect on the results of operations for the
For
year.
the year, okay,
Because it's just a loan.
okay,
It's not revenue or expenditure.
okay. But even with what you're saying, though, you say you made it was 203, but then we still are carrying the 850,000 on the general fund. So
Well, in
I mean, we
16
still
in
have that
16
out
it-
there, so.
In 16, it became a liability because we did not have the authority to bond that anymore.
Right, but it still has to be repaid out of the general fund.
Yes.
So we're saying we made 203, but we still owe 800,000. So,
But it would, but
but
it's,
the
right,
recreation
Yeah, we still have
fund
3 million in
also
fund
owes the
balance.
general fund 500,000.
Right.
But there's no money in the recreation fund to pay the
So-
How come we
500,000
have
back
about
to the general fund.
3.7 million in fund balance?
yeah, the bottom line is
That goes
either
back a long time.
recreation
Yeah.
fees and or
Yeah.
combination of general fund has to pay that $850 back, or next year you have the same comment, so we can go forward to that one since we're talking about it. That's number 5, no, number 6.
But we did layoffs, we raised taxes, we did layoffs, we cut back on expenses in order to meet that 2%, 3% of making up the deficit over the years, rather than just hitting everybody with a 12% tax increase.
So comment 6 is the other side of this, where if we do take $800,000 from the general fund and pay back this capital project, then comment number 6 goes away, but then the fund balance that we have is $800,000 less. If we don't, then that comment will stay, and the 6 will stay.
And how detrimental to our bond rating is that comment?
You
It's
know
not
what, it's singly, I don't know, it's really a matter, what they really wanna see is that we're not continuing to take from fund balance. I don't know how much they want us to put in on a regular basis to get back up to 15%.
But we have raised taxes every year, which they wanted to see.
Yep.
They wanted to see, you know, the minimum raise in taxes, which is what we did, trying to stay under
And
the cap.
piercing the cap for 2 years also helped.
Unfortunately, yep.
Justice Court
You get better
ordered,
credit when you borrow out of your shoes, I guess.
Yeah, but even after we raised the taxes, our bond rating didn't, the advisory bond rating didn't change, it stayed the same, at the lower.
They-
Go ahead,
they-
go ahead,
it was a
I
good
mean,
they
this is,
want us-
let's do the audit report.
It was a good thing.
Moody's would love for us to raise taxes 20% and get rid of all that, and that's where the balance comes. Okay, so the next one is the Justice Court audit. This one's fairly simple. The audit was finished on time, it still has not been issued, and, excuse me, that's what created a second agreed upon procedures audit for Justice Court. The reason why it wasn't issued is because there was a document that wasn't signed that was critical to issuing those statements. The CPA firm has still not received that signed document, even though there's been another audit, okay? We're waiting to see what happens with that. They're actually in here now doing the next audit, okay, for this year, that will be done by the end of this month in order to be done timely. However,
They can't complete it.
well, this,
without-
if that document is signed off on, then they will be able to complete it.
But if the document gets signed off for this year, because somebody, can that be signed off for this year without having completed the prior year?
Yeah, the they're
Individual
separate
years.
years.
Okay.
They're separate years, yeah. Okay, that's number 4. So number 4 was a new one, we went over number 6, that's a new one, and number 5 is the third new comment. So, as the board did back in 2007, when I needed help, the board had given me consultants to help us catch up on the financials, where we added $75 million in assets. The board, last night, had given me a temporary floater to help me out because of the condition of my office as far as employees. We also had replaced a deputy financial administrator and another employee, an accountant in my office in October, November of last year. So when you read through these, what was happening, if you look at, there's 3 comments in here, budget adjustments. We would come to the board and ask for budget adjustments, which were done, the resolutions were passed, but the adjustments were not made on a timely basis. Okay, so that's really the first comment, the adjustments were not made timely.
So how do we stop that?
Well, we have procedures where they should be, but they just weren't, okay? They just weren't done on a timely basis.
Okay, are they written procedures?
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
can,
Yep.
just share them with us, so,
Mhm.
I don't, we're not looking.
The second comment is,
Well, the adjustments by the same employee signing off as the preparer, the reviewer, and also responsible
Right.
parties.
so there was
Yeah.
one, there was a person in my office that was supposed to review the accountant's work and sign off on it. In some cases, that person didn't, so the person who made the journal entry, both made the journal entry and posted the journal entry. And that shouldn't happen according to our internal controls, okay? And then even when that person didn't always do it timely, along with looking at the schedule. So whether it was a bank rec or our interfund payables and receivables or whatever it may be, were not reviewed on a regular basis, and they were supposed to be, okay? So they were reviewed at the end of the year, but during the year they weren't necessarily reviewed on a timely basis. and that's what we're looking for.
So that's been corrected, you're comfortable
Well,
that that's been corrected now?
the procedures are still in place, but yes, we have new employees now, so that will be done going forward.
Are we gonna see that in 217?
Well, we did December, don't forget, we had 2 new employees in October, November doing this, so they have reviewed, the deputy financial administrator has reviewed those documents, but they did not potentially, I don't know, in February, March, and April if they were reviewed timely. They weren't in 16, I'm not sure if in February, March, and April of 17 they were.
But I think it's not even a timely, it's who's signing off on them.
Well, there were ones again that we
Now
had,
he has more
we
people in
had,
his
we had one
office.
accountant doing it, so if the deputy financial administrator didn't sign off on it, then he would post it himself.
And that was some of our, deficiencies in past audits, is that we only had one
Right.
accountant in the office. So that's why we hired additional accountants, and that you need accountants making these adjustments.
If you go back to 2007's audit, that's one of the things they said, that we need, you know.
Checks and balances, absolutely.
Right, so we need other accountants in the office, and that's the process there. We have one accountant doing the journal entries, the other one posting it. Because we didn't have that in 2016 and 2017, and because the deputy financial administrator wasn't then approving them or reviewing them timely, that's what these comments are about. Okay.
Number 2.
The last one, account function, capital fund. I have to go back and look at what there's, apparently there was a capital fund that was reported to the wrong accounting function, or the wrong account function, I should say, and the schedule backed it up was fine, but it just processed it or just journalized it to the wrong function. It means it was reported, but maybe it was reported as recreation instead of home and community, I'm not sure, I'll go back and look at the detail for that. But that's what that one is.
Okay,
So
then
when
you'll
they
share,
check-
you'll share that
Yep,
when you figure out what it is.
so when they checked the supporting documentation to it and saw what function it should have been, their determination was it should have been this function, not that function.
Okay. So recreation has, $3 million in their volleyball account, I'm like, where the hell did that come from?
No, it was really a matter of where it was reported on the financials and the capital project. The interpretation of what type of function it was. So if you look at our chart of accounts, you'll see, there's a codes from 1 to 9, like code 1 is administrative or general government support. Code 3 is public safety, police and that stuff. Code 5 is
It's just
highway.
general codings.
Yeah, so code 5 is highway, would be anything to do with highway. There was a project that was coded potentially to recreation that really should have been home and community. I have to find
I
out
get
the
it.
detail.
But then does that then reflect on checks paid when bills are paid?
No, the checks were paid, everything was paid.
But I mean, but like if, when we approve it, right, so we approve, code A1, the coding, so when we approve the paid bills, if it was that then corrected in that, cause we vote on that, is that then gone back and corrected in that manner, so that it's reflected?
Yeah, you guys would have approved what fund it was paid out of, but then where we reported it at the end of the year, typically in an operating fund, yes, that would affect that. In a capital fund, those costs are accumulated until we finish the project and then
Oh,
we
okay,
code it
it's
to the
capital,
account.
it's capital,
So,
okay.
Is that all your scratch notes?
That's all my scratch notes.
All right, so then you'll send us the procedure for the internal controls?
Yeah, I'll give you a procedure showing why,
You have a written procedure,
Yes.
adopted procedure, correct? And then the year-end audit schedules. Now, for the procedures since this has been a comment, it was, pointed out in 2007, this is 2016 audit, and we're still getting banged for the same thing. Internally, do you guys check this on a periodic basis for the budget adjustments?
yeah, these comments, you're talking about the comments, the first 3 comments that were repeat comments, that last comment was a new comment.
No, on page 7, right, budget adjustments, you guys, you said that in 2017, that was, 2007,
That was not a comment.
was not a comment.
1, 2, and 3 were repeat comments. Of the 17 we had back in
I'm
2000.
talking, on number 5,
Mhm.
right, in number 1, the budget adjustments.
That's a new comment.
That's a new comment,
That's a new
okay. So are you periodically checking now? Who's checking to make sure that they're in compliance?
Yes,
I know you have a
that's what-
procedure,
Yes,
but,
that's what the deputy financial administrator does now.
and how often do they do that?
Well, every
Every
month
day.
now, she's tying out the balance sheet, basically, that's what all this is about.
But then who's checking to make sure it's, because last time it was not in compliance, and, you know, obviously we either knew it was in compliance or it was not in compliance, but if we have somebody who's actually doing the procedure themselves, who's overseeing to make sure that it remains in
Well, that-
compliance
well,
for the people that are doing
Well,
it?
now we have two accountants, so we have one accountant doing the entry, one accounting approving that, and then the deputy financial administrator is then tying out the books at the end of the month to make
Okay,
sure
so
that
every
we have
month there's a
schedules, yes.
check on its mission, okay.
Right, but the budget transfers usually occur at the end of the year, in December or November,
Yeah,
December,
those.
when we start running out of
Right.
funds, and then they're not replenished until January.
Mhm.
So it will be a repeating comment when budget
Well, because-
transfers are made, and then
No,
they'll-
No.
those budget transfers will be fine, the repeating comments will be how much of it was fixed in time for the, what's probably gonna happen in all these is, they'll see that it still happened during 17, but now that we have new staff in here and we have new software, those procedures are now followed regularly, and they'll say the comment is fixed, basically.
Okay.
If you look in some of these, even if you look at some of the original 17, and you go through the years, so we did 7, 8, 9 together, those 17 comments were made for all 3 years, because we couldn't fix them, you know, we weren't fixing them while we were fixing the audit itself. So the next year, you'll notice that it went down to 13 comments, then 8 comments, because every year we spent more time, which is the most important one to fix. The 3 that were left on here were, really all had to do with money.
Right.
We didn't have money for software, so we did that as we could.
Yeah.
We didn't have money for, to pay down the receivables, and we didn't have money, for the, fund balance. Okay, so we had to keep drawing down on the fund balance because of money. So those stayed on there because we just didn't, unless we wouldn't go out and spend all the money to do that, we weren't going to. So that's what happens on those, but the year after they're fixed, they may be fixed in the middle of a year, don't forget, we're not getting the comments, in this case, we didn't have the comments till November, December, even if we get them in September, you already have 9 months of that comment happening in that year. So now that we fix them at the end of the year, they'll say, repeat comment, fixed in 2018, or fixed in December of 2017, depending on when it was fixed.
Well, we've added a part-time staff person to you now too, that'll be helpful.
Well, that's what I said, that,
And you,
thanks
you
to
had a
last
lot
night.
of department turnover, but maybe that'll settle down.
Yeah, but it was the
Yeah, nobody wants
accountants
to work
that we
with
had,
us. Like
that.
The accounts
that-
that we had,
Real
that's
job,
make-
man.
that's
This
making
audit
work.
reflects
man.
the accountants that we hired last year.
They want
to-
their
right,
coffee
so-
breaks.
All right, very good. Thank you, I see you got your notebook.
Yes.
Tell Anne Marie that she just left, that she can come back in.
Yes, thank you.
Is this from Jeff?
I'm not sure if it's from Jeff or John Penn.
You were looking at those, right? You've been looking at different ones, right?
Yeah.
Sweet mellow milk?
Yes, that is true. I just asked Anne Marie to come up because to, just review the, EPCAL Recreation Park overview, because, there's been inquiries about the park over there, and we're just kind of an overview, as to if somebody was interested in putting up something there, how do we do it? Does it have to be an RFP?
What park?
But
The
the rec-
town, the 92 acres up at Epcal that the town has, where the ball fields are.
Yeah,
Well, so what I've provided for the town board, you can read at your leisure, is an opinion from the state controller as well as a Court of Appeals case. Because if I'm anticipating correctly, what the inquiry is, so let me lay it out. We have dedicated 90 acres for park use at Epcal. We have only improved, and we did that by resolution. There were also, it's all under a lease between the town and the CBA. 60 acres is improved. Ball fields, parking, dog park. There remains an additional 30 acres, which are designated for park use, that are not improved. So, for example, if an entity such as Long Island Sports and Entertainment Complex, by Arena Management of New York, Inc., wanted to, quote, create a, sports complex on the 90 acres. We all are aware, public trust doctrine must be a park. It must be municipal in use. But can we allow a private developer, if I'm anticipating the question, can we allow because we don't have the funds right now, can we allow a private developer to develop a sports complex on the 30 acres? We can, but subject to certain criteria. Typically, and the County of Suffolk had actually, the first opinion I gave you, asked that question. And what they basically said is, you may, provided that local preference for all events. We want to use it, whether or not you're putting, here they talk about a hockey rink, a lacrosse field. The town would have to always, first preference. Second, what would be required, and that after a certain period of time, it becomes owned by the town or the CDA.
So it'd be like a 100-year lease?
But, yeah, we could work it out that way. The interesting, or the,
Jim's shaking his head.
concern is not bad necessarily, but we really have to be careful, is not everything is considered park use. You can have a restaurant, a concession stand, there's case law on that. So in reviewing this proposal,
It's changed from,
okay,
just so you know.
okay, there's a lot of different activities and venues in there. Could we have a theater or a concert park as part of it? Yeah, probably.
I haven't seen this, is this something that?
It's just a,
It's not a proposal for
General-
this, the question is, if somebody comes to us and wants to put something there, what is the mechanism that the town would use for that?
We'll sell a piece of land.
Well,
we
but-
could,
but not in this recreational area, and the other thing is, does this need to go out for an RFP? If somebody's coming in for something like this, do we need to RFP a project? How would we do this? If one person's coming in, what would be the mechanism the town would use for it? Because it's still considered urban renewal.
correct. So, no matter what, we'd have to comply with, General Municipal Law 15 and 15A. But as you know, in an urban renewal area, you are not required to sell it for fair market value, provided that you adhere to the provisions of law. That said, no, we would not have to go out to RFP.
But there are other people that have come in the past that have wanted to use the town park and the town property for their own venues and for, indoor lacrosse arenas and
Right,
hockey
right.
rinks and ice
Yeah,
skating rinks
It
and.
doesn't preclude us from doing an RFP, but we don't have to.
I know, but if we were going to do it, then I would wanna put out an RFP
Well, that's
just
what
so
this
that.
discussion is about, to
Right.
get what our available options are and what's the sense of the board.
I would wanna put it out for an RFP because this may not be the best project that could be presented to us for somebody to use our town parklands to improve our park.
Is this a
For
profit
advantage to
making?
do an RFP,
Right.
absolutely.
On behalf of the entity?
Any entity?
They could,
course.
they would still have to present, nothing's,
Oh, I
They're
don't.
not donating it. But the
but
law
we're,
doesn't,
but
the
we're
law
not talking
doesn't
about a
prohibit
particular
that.
project.
Right.
We're
I
talking
was
about.
giving an
I don't know if
example.
I don't
did
think I like the
something
whole
like this.
concept.
think-
But that's just me, but
Well,
listen, I
We don't have the
don't.
money to
Well,
do
the
the
town would
lights for
like
the
it.
fields, we don't have the money to do extra fields that we need, or, we're really far
realize
behind
that.
other towns as far as providing park services for our
We won't
constituents.
be
But
for,
this
it won't be for 100
taxpayers.
years.
This is,
I'll give you that.
but this is what the discussion is. Is this something that we would even consider?
Absolutely.
If this is something we consider, what is the scope of what we would consider somebody being able to put up there? And then if we did consider what the scope is, would we go with, if somebody came to us and said they wanted to do it, or would we put it out for an RFP? So that's really what this discussion is about. Where do we
I'd love to
sit?
have this discussion with the recreation department.
Well,
Well,
so,
this is the beginning of
so
that.
let me say, on that issue, Ray and I, together with Dawn, have talked about the concept of the private-public partnership. Why? Because when there are financial constraints, it's an ability to achieve a public objective and deliver a good product to the public. We get preference, so, you know, and for at least a period of time, we avoid maintenance potentially, upkeep, you know, that would all be on the entity owning it. Would they be entitled to derive a profit? Yes, that's why they're doing it, but at the same time, we're delivering something to our taxpayers.
That we're unable to provide.
To
And
improve their quality of
it's
life,
a very,
something they would enjoy.
it's become a very popular concept with community development agencies across the United States. There's thesis papers on this public-private partnership, and Dawn and I and Ray have been talking about it, not only simply for like EPCAL and the park, but even downtown and improvements downtown. You know, we could utilize it if you wanted to, you know, at one point they wanted to put a carousel in downtown or a ice skating rink. It's something that you can really work into.
Public-private partnership.
Yep.
Yeah, one of the problems that we had in the past when this proposal had come in was, they wanted to put a hotel on the property. So that.
You can dictate whatever, like this, you know, somebody said convention center, I said, no, you can't, it's still gotta be in the RFP, what it is that you, and you still have to comply with zoning.
Councilwoman Giglio, I will tell you, you are 100% on target, because the opinion that I didn't provide to all of you, which is 2012, which involved what improvements can you do on property preserved for the public trust. And it allowed the restaurants and the concert, but
Probably
it
even
did
a
not
convention center.
allow the lodging. This opinion said in this case, it ran afield of really
The benefit.
heartland.
Right.
So then the question becomes, you know, for the town board, is this something that you might consider doing an RFP possibly for, or?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think Ray has been approached 2 or 3 times, that's why it initially came up. CDA director has, so.
Now,
so
if
maybe
we,
between Ray and Dawn, we can have them
Yeah.
write something up, we can review, see if it's
What is
something that.
RFP, what exactly are we trying to draw?
Well, that's,
Can you
A
talk about some of the
public-private
type of
partnership.
projects,
Of
or
what?
some of the type of
Horse racing?
activities?
well, why don't we,
Swimming?
no, we would have them come
Tennis,
in.
what?
indoor pool, we
But-
could get the lights on the ball fields, we could get, but there would be there would have to be, it would have to be a balance, because the lease, if we did a long-term lease, what their lease payments would be versus what the rate to residents of Riverhead might be versus,
Well,
and I
that's all
don't
the
know.
conditions of, I get that,
But
that's.
can we do that? Can we say that they have to charge a reduced rate for Riverhead residents?
Absolutely. If all of you may recall, when we offered property at EPCAL to the YMCA,
Mhm.
if you remember, in my draft contract, I required them to provide unique and special programs available to Town of Riverhead residents, a reduced fee to all of Town of Riverhead residents. Why? Because that's what we were delivering over and above what the remainder of the Suffolk County residents that were gonna utilize the YMCA. That's the public benefit.
So, Anne Marie, we're talking about some sort of, perhaps like multi-sports complex, maybe, because people are always bringing up indoor hockey rink, something like that.
It could
Indoor
go,
pool.
it
Indoor
could go
pool.
from the simple as lacrosse fields, and I don't mean that that's simple, but, you know, basic, to, you know, a complex,
And
a
you could
major
put,
sports
yeah,
complex.
and you could put the RFP out there with the leeway, and then you see what you get, see what you get back,
Right.
you know,
And
that will run the
This is something that's
gamut.
been very popular in other municipalities.
Across the United States. I mean, everybody's in the financial crunch. You know, nobody recovered from, the recent recession.
Well, I know that there was originally, when they put Veterans Memorial Park up there and the millions of dollars that we spent to get it at least to where it's at now, that there was a game plan of where they wanted to see that expand to. The dog park was there was some tennis courts there, there was a playground there, I think there was even some design for the 30 acres that we didn't touch. I'd like to see what those are, you know.
But that's where we're $850,000 in a hole without any lights up there.
I know exactly where that came from, I've only been
So-
here a decade, but I'm saying that should be included in the RFP. I mean,
Oh, okay.
That whole game plan, if you're gonna,
Well,
I'd like to see where the rec department and the recreation advisory wanted, there was a game plan when we started that whole.
well, if I could, I'm aware of that because I actually litigated with one of the contractors, on the ball field, and everybody will recall, Dawn and I spent a good, better part of 6 months litigating in Supreme Court, related to the, quote, non-development in furtherance of economic development for that particular site. What was proposed was the original 90 acres. And if you look at all the budget transfers and the description of the resolutions regarding the budget, it was for the first proposed 60 acres of it. It wasn't part two. The design only designed the 60 acres. So, to my knowledge, that kind of frees up the 30 with what you want to do. And I think Ray has an opinion, the sports that are very popular and the demand of the Riverhead school children, what they
We
need.
talked about this
So-
at the
It's
rec
gotta be
meeting.
multi-use,
I
because
know
things
that
change.
it's
So
something
we'll-
they're interested in.
We'll ask Ray,
Soccer's hot today,
Ray
it'll
to
be
come in, if the rec committee could talk about it and give some advice on that, and then we'll reschedule this again.
And I would have Dawn come in because,
If the 30 acres, it can be a separate development altogether, if it's not included in doing that,
Island
Still
Water
in an
Park
urban
is
renewal zone.
Island Water Park could come in with a proposal because they were saying, I'll build the town a parking lot for your ball fields, adjoining my property, and so that we can
It's been
share
done
the
that for 20
parking.
years, I haven't seen a skier there yet.
Actually, yeah,
A
well,
lot of,
A lot of motorbikes, but I haven't seen a lot of.
so, but Dawn can come in because she's done a lot of research on the public-private partnerships, and she has great photographic, evidence of what's been accomplished in different towns.
I think it's a great idea.
Great.
so we'll schedule that for the next meeting, we'll have her come in, she can do a presentation, we can listen to it, we'll have Ray here for that, will the rec advisory have met by then?
I love it.
And
That sounds
they can
exciting.
come, this
Yeah.
way they know they can come and listen and be here for that, give us some opinion on that, and then we can,
I jumped pretty
See what
quick on
we
this,
do.
only because
Jody,
I
you better
thought
get
something
healed
other
up.
than what you were.
You get out there.
all right,
We're
Great,
releasing-
thank you
I
very
saw
much.
releasing our ballparks to some company, I was like, whoa, 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 whoa.
This would be called Paul Askew. The Long Island Sports and Entertainment Complex, was that the name of the?
It was a name they gave to a very, very general proposal. It didn't even indicate where it was to be cited.
Oh, I
within
thought that was
town.
the Office of the State Comptroller opinion you were citing.
No,
No.
no, no, no,
Okay.
no.
So has someone proposed this?
somebody's,
Several.
yeah, a couple people have proposed to have some sort of sporting complex, and where could they do it in town, and what would work, and then that's where the idea came up for over here, and then we're trying to figure out if we do have the idea for there, how do we do it? To have it be a possibility. That's where we're at.
So,
I think
of
Riverhead
the
would love it.
90 acres, I think there was like a 62-acre park, right, that got developed.
Correct.
Did you get that?
So the 30 acres or whatever is like,
What'd you make a motion to?
like a separate area altogether. It's not like around the 62 acres.
Well,
There's no
it's
distinction.
all one parcel.
But like, so is the 30 acres sort of like
It's
to itself?
to the
Yeah.
east.
To the,
Okay.
This would be a staycation thing.
Yeah.
to the
Without
east,
the
where
large-
they're
Yeah,
using it
exactly.
as a.
Well,
Oh, yeah,
stay at your
let's-
house,
Let's make it an
over
RV
there.
park, are you kidding me?
With the ticks and chiggers.
Let's make it an RV park, yeah, we'll call it Chigga Park or something.
Tables and benches and everything
Oh,
will be taken.
Don't bring us
Yes.
down.
Yeah, RV park would be perfect, are you kidding?
Actually, those benches and everything else is all.
A man-made lake there, nice RV park around it, I think it's a great idea.
Can I have a first and a second to close our chat session?
So moved to close the section.
All in
there,
favor?
close the
That's a great thing.
And there
You
is
have
no.
a fadeaway campground right there, right around a little lake, around the ballparks, around the dog park.